Hey guys, welcome to the channel. This is part 1 of What If Ultimecia was sealed in Naruto. If you guys enjoy this fanfiction, then comment down, like and subscribe, and let go of the video is 10 likes, so like this video, let me that you're interested in the series and you want the next part. Then go ahead and check out the other what ifs in the channel. Before we start, please do support for more awesome content. Don't forget to subscribe and leave, also share the video with your friends, and link in the description. So let's go. Disclaimer: I do not own Jenova, Ultimecia, Naruto, or the Final Fantasy franchise. They belong to their respective owners. Time was fleeting. Time was unstoppable. Time was evasive, never holding still. Ultimecia was caught within her own time compression, her body frozen into a stop-like state, her thoughts moving at a sluggish pace while she tried to figure out where she had gone wrong. I prepared the spell correctly. I fought off my attackers. I cast the spell. Where did I slip? Was it never meant to be, to control time to that extent? To obliterate all reality by compressing an eternity into an instant? I don't understand. Ultimecia, Grand Sorceress, age 26. Manipulator of time and space. She had sent her consciousness back through time to possess Edia, Rinoa, and Adel at different points, all to capture Elone, to send her mind even further back in time. All to compress time, to destroy the hateful, spiteful world she had to live in. To save future generations of sorceresses the pain of having to know you're never wanted, to live under the shadows of the stereotype, the evil, megalomaniacal, tyrannical sorceresses. I tried so hard, but however hard I tried, it still wasn't enough. It's only a matter of time, they said. Soon she'll show her true colors, they said. Every slight mistake I made was blown so far out of proportion, had to adopt a fake accent and identity, just to save my sanity. I had to wear an unbreakable mask of apathy, hiding my bitterness at being the scum of the earth, the scapegoat to blame for every mishap. Farm burned down. Must be a fire spell from a damn sorceress. Cows are skittish. Damn sorceress bitch must be close. Mission failed. That hind-whore must have cursed it. Tired, just so tired. I hope the damn world is happy now. That'll give them a real scare. Too bad, they'll just see sorceresses, even worse, now. She had done it. She had completed time compression, but at what cost? No being is allowed to have that much power, to be able to do the work of the gods themselves. And now she was stuck in her own spell, for what seemed to be an eternity, to mull over her thoughts and actions up to this point. It's not like she had anything else to do, right? She was trapped for perhaps a true eternity, by her own actions. The only thing she could do, really. She couldn't blink, couldn't breathe, and couldn't scratch that itch on her nose. Just had to sit there and think, in the dreary midnight void of time compression. Her castle and enemies seemingly destroyed by the spell, as she floated there, stuck in stasis. I wonder, if I ever survive this, can I ever live in peace? Just a normal woman with extraordinary abilities, but never under the stigma of the populace. Maybe then, I can finally have my peace, and get these goddamn horns out of my hair. Note to self: horns are not a good accessory, neither is this dress. Next note: use powers in selfish ways to change my appearance, if I ever get out of this thing. Her thoughts of how to create a decent, non-whorish appearance was interrupted by an odd sensation. At first it started as a slight twisting feeling in her chest, which quickly escalated into an all-out tearing sensation. Pins and needles couldn't describe the feeling. It was as if her entire body was rejecting itself. Lances of searing, almost blistering heat jabbed through her being, as the absolute darkness she was resting in exploded in a prismatic flash of color, blinding her temporarily. She could feel it, held by the soft flowing energy slipping across her body with an almost ocean-like fluidity. The currents of the green energy leaving soft, hair-thin touches across her skin, wrapped within its warm embrace. She could hear it, soft pulsing echoes as the currents swayed about her, moving along on their wayward wanderings, never following a true path, chaotic yet orderly. The currents knew where to go, and they went there, but they never moved the same way twice. She could even somewhat sense it, like one would feel the presence of a benevolent deity, a tranquil aura weighing down on her consciousness. But never see it beyond the all-encompassing green glow, almost monotone in its shade of green. She couldn't smell it, or taste it. After all, what would the pure essence of life smell like? Flowers. That would simply be the essence of flowers. Nothing could describe the smell of life. The taste would be better left unsaid. She was trapped within the lifestream of the planet, the only company she had was herself, and maybe her son. No, wait, he got absorbed, his mind dispersed within the eternal tranquility of the planet, never again to reform into Sephiroth, the one-winged angel of death. Ah well, he was a bad son anyway. Jenova was not a saint, by any means. She had arrived on the planet over 1,000 years before the first sorceress was discovered. She had crashed into the northern continent, creating the northern crater, and limped out of the destruction. Her natural form would probably give the nearby life forms pause, so she took the time to shapeshift into someone she had seen within the treacherous landscape of the crater, trapped beneath boulders, and quite dead. Of course, when she stumbled out of the destruction, who should she meet but that guy's wife? And then when she was found out to not be that woman's husband, all of a sudden everyone's screaming about an alien taking the form of people's dead relatives. How was she supposed to know that woman knew that guy was dead as soon as he died, cause she can hear the planet and everything in it? They attacked Jenova on sight, and she was forced to fight back, trying to not hurt anyone. Unfortunately, her pause to deal fatal damage to anyone was her demise. They rounded up all these ancients, and sealed her away, forcing her to shapeshift back into her natural form, stuck in the crater until someone would come by and release her. Granted, she was still conscious of everything around her, but that wasn't that much of a help, considering she couldn't move, or do anything. Thousands of years later, that just happened to be a Shinra platoon, led by who else but Hojo. He apparently had heard the rumor of the calamity of the heavens, was still sealed away in the northern crater. HMPH, I'm just glad, that fucker is gone, sick, twisted bastard, I wish I could have killed him, but no, he took some of my cells and injected them into a goddamn fetus, disgusting fuck. After that Sephiroth guy finally learned about it, he went psycho on everyone, so I contacted his mind, trying to get him to release me, but that bastard just wanted my power for himself, so I tried to take over his mind, and failed. He instead took over my body, and tried to deal a fatal wound to the planet, claiming his mother wanted to be with him forever. I do feel sorry for that poor heiress girl, though, stabbed through the stomach by a maniacal, Oedipal bastard. I wonder, she was an ancient, I wonder if I can apologize to her in the livestream. She tried to send her thoughts to the planet itself, managing to screw up her face in a grand imitation of constipation, but no response. She relaxed a little, and tried to speak, but no words would escape her mouth. A slow tear trailed down her cheek as she thought of all the destruction her son had caused in her name, and that perhaps the planet had forsaken her, leaving her to forever be trapped, never absorbed, never released from the core of the planet. As her thoughts took a depressing turn, she was blinded by a flash of green-white, and found herself in a field of flowers set against a white sky. She could feel someone else's presence near her, and if memory served, it was that flower girl, Eris. Were you trying to reach out to me, Jenova? A soft voice stated from behind her. Jenova relaxed, running a hand through her translucent, silver-white hair in an attempt to stave off the feelings that swelled up in her. She could finally apologize, and hopefully be forgiven for all the heinous grievances she never committed or planned to commit. Yes, I wanted to apologize, I was never sent here to destroy the planet, I want to be forgiven. Eris, her voice was a tad bit raspy from thousands of years of disuse, yet still managed to convey her message as she tried to make her vocal cords relearn how to work. Oh, what is there to be forgiven? We were always told that the calamity of the heavens was sent here to destroy the planet, and to infect all others, causing destruction and chaos around the universe. Eris' voice had a slight edge to it, unsure if she should trust the one that was blamed for so much. I merely was trying to escape my own planet as it neared its own destruction. When I came here, I assumed the form of someone I found dying in the northern crater, but your ancestors thought I was some form of a threat that could take the shape of their dead loved ones and sealed me away, and then that bastard Hojo started experimenting on me while I was still conscious, yet held in stasis in a large tube. I never wanted any of this to happen, so I tried to take over Sephiroth's mind. That didn't go over well. What happened? He was able to circumvent the mind control, and took over my body, destroying his own as he used my ability to shapeshift into his old body. He used my abilities for his own gains, His mind, demented from Hojo's experiments, came up with the idea that I was his mother, and that since all the files said I was to destroy the planet, that he should do that for me. A sneer almost echoed off her statement, her mind repulsed by the idea that she should ever want to do anything of the sort. Why are you telling this all to me now? It's a little late, isn't it? Sephiroth is dead, his mind destroyed within the lifestream, the black materia is also gone, destroyed in the aftereffects of Holy. The planet shall be in danger no more. A curious tone slipped into her speech. She could detect no lie from Jenova, and yet all the pieces were into place for her story. She could be easily misunderstood from what happened to her, not to mention all of Sephiroth's great deeds, in the name of his mother. I just want to be forgiven. Even though I may not have been in control, I still witnessed everything he did, and it sickened me. I tried so hard to prevent him, especially from murdering you. I was nearly screaming in his mind to stop, but I suppose he was too far gone in his little world. 2 tears dripped out of her mismatched eyes, painting silvery trails down her light blue cheeks, before falling to the flowers below. You have given me a lot to think about, Jenova. I'll have to discuss this with the other souls of the ancients, to get their recollection of what happened. When you first arrived, if all goes well, I'll release you from the lifestream, seeing as how your soul is alien to this planet, and cannot be absorbed for reincarnation. Thank you, that is all I wish for. I'm just tired, I guess. Her voice was absolutely dripping with Ian's old weariness. I've been conscious for over 3,000 years, can you wake me from my hibernation when you've reached a decision? Of course. Sleep now, Jenova, and I shall wake you when we're done. Jenova slowly closed her eyes, almost sobbing with relief at finally being able to descend into sleep once more, laying her body amidst the field of flowers. As she slipped off into her world of slumber, only one thought resounded within her mind. Thank you, Eris, for giving me a chance. Millennia later. Jenova, it's time to wake up, we've reached a decision. Eris' light voice broke through the darkness of her hibernation, rousing her from an almost comatose slumber. She gently stood up amidst the flowers, taking special care to not smash one on accident, smoothing her waist-length silver-white hair down. She looked down at herself and a light pink blush spread across her face, realizing she had been naked ever since she was sealed, and it never occurred to her to put on some clothing. Molding some of her cells to her will, she created a flowing silver kimono that reached down to her ankles. She slipped her arms into her sleeves and turned around to face Eris, a content smile on her face at finally being able to sleep after so long. She held in a smirk at the slight widening of the eyes, and the astonishment shone within the ancient's green orbs. Surely you knew I could control my cells at will, right? It's not so hard to create clothing out of that, even replicating the true feel of the clothes, so long as I've felt them before. Eris merely nodded, containing her surprise at the level of control required for such a feat. I did, but we never really saw you use that ability often. We only knew it existed because Sephiroth would create horrible abominations by dropping what looked to be a tentacle, and then it'd take shape into some malicious monster. He always referred to them as parts of his mother, so I guess that kind of didn't help with the stereotype of you being a planet-destroying monster. Jenova's lips curled downward into a frown, wanting nothing more than to utterly obliterate Sephiroth for the perversion of her ability, to torture his mind to the point that he fell into an incurable coma. To rend his, she pushed those thoughts aside for now and brought attention back to the matter at hand. That insufferable whelp, I hope he gets reincarnated as a roach in the middle of a pesticide convention. Oh well. You have reached a decision, yes. The green-eyed ancient giggled a little as she saw the flickers of emotion go through Jenova's eyes, judging by the pure hatred she exuded when she mentioned Sephiroth that she truly loathed the man for making a mockery of her abilities, and furthering the belief that she was some sort of monster. Yes, we have decided that we believe you, and that we shall release you from the livestream. It took a while to debate, because we had to get past some of the biases of the people who first saw you. They said something about, tentacles don't go there. Or some such nonsense. You wouldn't know anything about that, right? Jenova let her eyes wander all around the scenery, trying hard to hold in the urge to whistle innocently, before breaking down and giggling uncontrollably. I'm sorry, but when I first got here, I was trying to not kill anyone, so I attacked at their blind spots with blunt force. I think that guy got hit in the ass, and I really hope I didn't actually penetrate him. I didn't have any weapons, so I was forced to attack with my own cells, which is kind of an odd sensation, actually. Almost like stretching your body as one would stretch taffy, I guess. Eris laughed again, smiling softly as she tried to picture it. Yes, I suppose that might have been their own fault for attacking you. Either way, we've decided that you're trustworthy to live on the surface without going on a planet-destroying binge. Unfortunately, we'll never be able to reincarnate you, seeing as how your soul is so different from the souls within the lifestream, so you'll basically be immortal, and should you ever get nearly killed, you'll be brought here to recover before being released again. Unfortunately, since you first came here, the planet has changed quite a bit on the outside. There's only one large continent now, which they call the elemental countries. The only area we'll be able to release you in would be Fire Country. Is that alright with you? Jenova tapped an elegant, clawed fingertip against her chin, deep in thought about having to explore the world to see how much it had changed since her last stay, before responding with a twinge of wanderlust within her voice. It actually seems quite fine to me. Will anyone remember the calamity of the heavens, and persecute me for it? The ancient smiled disarmingly, gently setting a hand on Jenova's shoulder to calm her. Don't worry. After a combination of meteor almost being summoned, multiple wars, and the latest event of time compression which reconstructed almost all of the planet's surface, as well as obliterating all technology as they knew it, there would be no one alive that would remember anything. Most of the humans are busy relearning magic, but they have changed the dynamic of it sort of. They channel their energy not through materia, but through different hand gestures they call hand seals to recreate the effects of some of the magic that was lost. The blue-skinned woman grinned wide, showing off her perfect set of teeth. I think I'll like the planet just the way it is right now. I promise I won't mess around with it too much. Who knows? I might find a successor to my name and abilities out there, if they're deemed worthy enough. If they were born human in the first place, then they might also become nigh immortal like myself, so I'll have to warn them of that before I take action. Wouldn't want someone else to suffer like myself for forgetting that. Eris, lips twitched upward in a serene smile, her eyes sparkling mischievously as she prepared to defy one of the principal rules of the planet. Are you ready to go back, Jenova? Yes. With that one word, the field of flowers disappeared in a green flash, the planet crying out with the effort to expel the alien from the depths of its core. Earthquakes rumbled in the location with the deepest crevice, the area where Jenova was about to re-emerge. The lifestream surged upwards from there, the green liquid pooling out of the crack in the planet's exterior, carrying with it an ecstatic blue woman. Ultimecia surged to her feet, looking around the area in which she found herself. Coughing heavily with the intake of air she felt deprived of for so long, she wobbled her way to the cave wall, pressing a hand to it as she tried hard to recollect what happened. If I remember correctly, she mumbled to herself as her voice strained to work after what seemed an eternity of disuse, I felt like I was being torn apart, then that flash, where am I? When am I? Her thoughts were derailed when she realized she was not alone in the cave. A low growling sound was all that warned her of the impending attack before 5 large claws slashed at where she had been moments before, only her instinct saved her by forcing her to phase through the wall and appear on top of her attacker. Fur. Lots and lots of blood-red fur. Soft, to be sure, but definitely not reflecting on the temperament of whatever it was connected to. She looked behind her to see 9 thick tails swaying back and forth, almost chaotically, and behind that an inky blackness, as if the cave had no end. She looked forward to see the exit of the cave, the sky a bruised purple-blue, denoting twilight. A deep rumbling sound emitted from further in the cave, startling her and the creature she was seated atop of. A deep green glow spread from the void behind her, brightening gradually until it became a bright light, blinding the creature as it looked back to search for the source of the cracking and groaning of the earth around it. A deep, anguished cry emitted from deep in the cave, as if the force to create that green glow was causing great pain to it. Before long the cave was flooded with bright green tidal wave of liquid, shoving the creature and its rider out of the cave with a deep roar, managing to drench the bottom half of the colossal creature. A soft thump was heard next to Ultimecia, as the rider on the radioactive green wave of doom, patent pending, landed next to her on the massive 9-tailed creature. She looked down to see a tall woman, about 6'0", with glacier blue skin and silver white waist-length hair, wearing an elegant silver kimono with wide sleeves. The woman was splayed out against the blood-red fur of the creature, and seemed to wake from a slumber as Ultimecia stared at her. NNGH, never again, am I asking to be rejected out of the planet, that thing screams too loud, the woman mumbled, rolling onto her back and opening her eyes. Ultimecia was startled at first, looking at a piercing red eye, that seemed to glow with a light of its own, matched with a softly glowing green eye as they stared at her. An elegant white eyebrow rose in obvious question of seeing someone so soon of waking up, but before the question could be asked, a tremendous roar of agony split the sky, the nine-tailed red behemoth shaking violently in obvious pain. Ultimecia and Jenova, as Ultimecia would later learn her name, was clung onto the back of the animal as it seemed to roar in pure torture, sprinting out of the cave, weaving side to side and destroying the landscape, a victim of extreme Mako poisoning from the wave of the lifestream that soaked it. A few hours, and a few introductions made at high speeds on a lumbering, agony-stricken nine-tailed fox. Later, Jenova and Ultimecia were still holding onto the Kyuubi as it sprinted with a large village as its target, seemingly dead set on its destruction. As they drew nearer, a large poof of smoke appeared, and a blonde man holding an equally blonde child on top of a gargantuan toad hopped into the direct path of the giant fox. The man whispered a few words, going through odd hand gestures faster than the eye could normally follow, and then both Jenova and Ultimecia felt an odd tugging sensation, before they spiraled along with the fox, into an intricate seal array on the blonde baby's stomach. They awoke a few hours later, and put the soul of the fox out of its misery since it was completely beyond the help of the sorceress and the alien. Ultimecia finally got to fix her fashion disaster, using her sorcery to reconstruct her red dress, if that article of clothing could be called such, into a flowing midnight black gown that more properly covered her body, ending just short of the ankles. She altered her hair, removing the odd horn ornaments, and let her metallic silver hair fall down to the middle of her back, the two strands of hair on either side of her face falling down the front of her chest, ending just short of her stomach. She looked over to Jenova and saw her wary gaze, her eyebrow raised in silent question of the feat performed by Ultimecia, causing the sorceress to grin and use her magic to create a pair of large, comfy chairs, beckoning the alien to sit down across from her. The two sat down to talk within the confines of a large cage, connected to a veritable labyrinth of sewer tunnels. Life stories were exchanged, powers discussed, and conjectures about their location were drawn. They studied the seal array that bound them from within the dank cell, learning that they need to wait for their container to approach them before they could work anything out. So they sat back down in the chairs, and Ultimecia conjured a 60 inches monitor screen to see through the container's eyes, and allowed them to also hear what was going on. They would be trapped in this state, watching through the child's eyes, powerless to help him for years to come, before they were finally able to meet him. Author's note: Woo, I got a review. Love Psycho. I think'll give him Healing Wind, Seal Evil, Breath of the Earth, Pulse of Life, and I guess maybe Great Gospel. Thoughts on how to pull this off without making it even more overpowered. Healing Wind takes an unholy amount of concentration to flow pure healing magic into the air, manipulating the wind to gently swirl all around the targets, allowing it to soothe all wounds via regeneration, as opposed to healing. And by that, I mean instead of causing a scar by stitching the wound together, it regenerates the missing flesh. No scar, no reduced lifespan from too much healing. Tsunade's Infuen Kai, Suzu Seisei. It's definitely not great for mid-battle usage, for he might be hit while trying to pull it off. Seal Evil. This can be used whenever he wants, but it takes some pretty good control to pull it off. It's also prone to wearing off if the target is good at manipulating genjutsu, regardless of the fact that it's not ninjutsu or genjutsu. Stop would be kind of overpowered in the Naruto world where even a few seconds is lethal. Weaves an intricate spell pattern through the air surrounding the targets to stop them for about 30 seconds to a minute, and prevents their voices from working for another 10 minutes afterwards. Breath of the Earth sends shockwaves of healing magic through the target's body, purging any and all ailments, complex or not, from them. It can remove biological diseases such as cancer, viruses such as the flu, poisons, and just about everything else that's negative in effect. The aftereffect of having your system purged so forcefully forces the target to undergo bed rest for a day due to the shock to the immune system of being sick one moment, and absolutely fine the next. Pulse of Life taps into the lifestream to regenerate and reconstruct damaged bodies. cannot bring dead souls back to life, but if some guy is like, hanging onto the last thread of life while his body is blown to bits, then this is the ability to bring him back. You don't even need to find all the missing parts, it'll just regenerate them all. Quite possibly the most powerful healing effect in Naruto's arsenal, but can only be used once a week since he channels the lifestream, so he gets mild Mako poisoning, and any more exposure to that would force him into a coma. Great gospel. Still thinking about it, it was the most ridiculous limit break ever. I'm thinking, can only be used in times of extreme duress. Meaning, life or death for Naruto or someone he cares a lot about. It calls on the legacy of the ancients, channeling Eris and her ancestors to send a surge of the lifestream into the skies, pouring healing rain down onto him and his allies. No invincible effect, but can bring back the dead's souls, but only if Eris and the other ancients deem them redeemable, so that they can reconstruct them from the lifestream instead of reincarnating them. Just my thoughts on the limits to make them powerful so that he'll use them, but not powerful enough to just be like. I see an enemy. Seal evil, decapitate. I got a paper cut. Healing wind. They're not meant for everyday usage, only for when nothing else works, or he needs an extreme amount of help at the time. He may be godlike in the ability to destroy things, but he can't do much when it comes to protection healing with his abilities. Before I forget, I'm making him use a staff as his primary weapon, because I think that never happens. Ever. They're always zanbatos, katanas, hell I even saw one with sei before. But never staves. Maybe it's because they're blunt force. Ah well. I'll just give him the guard stick since it looked decent compared to the ornamental style of the other staves. Rambling. On with the chapter. Disclaimer. I do not own Naruto, Jenova, Ultimecia, Final Fantasy VII, Final Fantasy VIII. They are all owned by their respective companies. Talking. Thoughts. Spell technique jutsu. Meeting the calamity of the heavens and the compressor of time. It was a grand afternoon in Konohagakure, the village hidden in the leaves. The sun was shining brightly on all the joyous people, the birds were singing in a heavenly choir of the joys of life. There was a bloodthirsty mob of ninjas and civilians trying to capture a 4-year-old child to rip him limb from limb. Naruto was currently running for his life through the winding streets of Konoha, stumbling on rocks, cats, and the occasional party favor. His clothes were dirty and nearly ripped to shreds, his usually golden skin turned a grimy brown from lack of showers, no whisker marks or other outward signs of the Jinchuuriki. There isn't a Kyuubi to influence that. All in all, he looked like a hobo. And he was currently sprinting as fast as his short little 4-year-old legs could carry him away from the mob, trying to escape the cries of, "Kill the demon. This is for my family." And, finish what the Yondaime started. All in all, a regular birthday for Naruto. He continued running as fast as he could, almost thanking the citizens for their persistence in running after him that gave him such great stamina and running speed over his short lifespan. Unfortunately, all good things come to an end, just as his escape was brutally cut off by a Chunin dropping from the rooftops in front of him, kunai in hand. The man's face was twisted in his hatred, you could almost wonder why he didn't start slobbering and growling. "You're not getting away this time, demon brat." Naruto simply tried to sidestep him, and go around. It was pointless to argue with them. It never made anything better, it just made it worse. His escape plan was cut off by the kunai hitting him in the back of his thigh, forcing him to the ground, and unable to escape. He pulled the kunai out of his leg, tossing it to the side as he ran down an alleyway, the Chunin not far behind, until he hit a dead end. He could almost sob in despair, his only escape cut off with a mob following him. He ran to the corner in the alleyway and curled up in a tiny ball, hoping that the added protection would save him from death. Kunai were stabbed, shuriken were thrown, boards with nails on them were swung, lead pipes were smashed down, and all other implements of doom descended on the poor child. Ribs were broken, his skin impaled by the kunai and shuriken, and large lacerations were ripped by the nails. Through it all, he didn't say a word, just let tears stream down his cheeks in a never-ending flow. Why always me? I never did anything, was his last thought before he lost consciousness, slipping into the embrace of the void to escape the pain. He stirred, wondering why his back and legs were wet. It wasn't the first time he'd wake up in an area not near where he was caught by the mob, but this would be the first time he woke up wet. His sky blue eyes fluttered before opening slowly, just a sliver at first to judge the area safe or not. He realized he was in a dank sewer, the ceiling almost crumbling, the walls yellowed with decay, and the water up about 6 inches deep. Strangely, though, the water didn't smell like anything. It was clear, almost as if it were pure. He checked his body and noted that, regardless of the fact that his clothes have new tears from the weapons, he still didn't have a scar or an injury. He sighed a bit, and decided to find out where the tunnels go. Left turn, right turn, left turn, left turn, these tunnels were nigh endless. His ears perked at the sounds of shouting in the distance, though, so he closed his eyes to better focus on his hearing. He followed the passages until he found himself in a rather large room, with only 3 walls. A wall to his left, a wall opposite him with another passage leading away, and the wall he came in through. The last area for a wall was a row of vertical bars, with a small slip of paper holding them together in the middle with the kanji for seal on it. He could clearly hear the 2 voices yelling at each other now, and strangely, they were both female. That's it. I'm going to compress time all over again. Nobody should have to deal with this stigma. The first voice seemed to be in her mid-20s to early 30s, showing her calculating nature. It was almost an apathetic tone, with a rather large hint of annoyance showing through at the moment. Hell no. I'm going to resummon Meteor on these bigoted fools. The fox isn't even here anymore, we killed it. The second voice was softer. Almost, a sibilant murmur through the cage, regardless of the fact that she was planning on worldwide destruction. It seemed as if she didn't often use her voice, but instead used other means of communication. Naruto slowly walked up to the bars and peered inside, but what he saw surprised him. A woman, about 5 feet 8 inches tall with an almost metallic shade of silver hair was standing up, her face sneering at a large monitor in front of her. On her back were 2 feathery black angel wings, with her hair falling neatly in between them down to her lower back. Her fists were balled in fury, dark purple energy glowing around them with an audible hum of power. Her eyes were flashing a bright golden, with dark purple zigzag tattoos spread from her hairline down to her eyes, and the edges of her mouth. She was wearing a maroon gown with wide sleeves, the edges floating an inch or 2 off the water as she hovered in the air without using her wings. The second woman was taller, about 6 feet 0, with flowing, translucent, white-silver hair that reached down to her waist. She had, strangely, one softly glowing ocean green eye and one brightly glowing crimson eye. Her teeth were bared at the same monitor, showing off her elongated canines. She had a light blue skin tone, a few shades darker than the sky. Her hands were bared in a claw-like manner, with good reason too, she couldn't ball her fists. Her long, slender fingers ended in vicious 2-inch claws at the tips, which would probably draw blood from the slightest touch. This woman was wearing a flowing silver kimono, the edges about 2 inches off the water to avoid getting damp. Unlike the other woman, she wasn't floating. Naruto stood there, dumbfounded as the 2 women discussed different ways to absolutely obliterate his attackers. He caught a few phrases, which were, tentacle rape, and, I'll make Itachi's Tsukiyomi look like a sneeze. Before he decided to let them know he was there, he let out a slight cough, standing just outside the bars, wondering if they'd notice him yet. All squabbling on different ways to castrate a man halted at the soft coughing noise. Ultimecia and Jenova slowly turned around, as if they were children caught breaking a flower vase by their mother. Their eyes widened at the sight of their container on the other side of the bars. Jenova retracted her claws back into fingernails, and stood there with an astonished look on her face. Ultimecia calmed herself, the purple energy dispersing into the air, her wings fading away, but still hovering above the water. She doesn't want her dress to get wet, does she? Seeing as how the women weren't going to start this off, Naruto scratched the side of his cheek and gave a small wave to them. Ah, hi. Where are we? Ultimecia's lips twitched upward in a semblance of a smile, her eyes fading back to the normal bright golden color, sans glowing. Her soft voice echoed around the large cage as she slowly floated towards him, not wanting to scare him off. We are inside your mind, Naruto. You were brought here when the mob almost killed you, but thankfully the Hokage and his Anbu saved you. I have stopped time inside here so we can discuss as much as we need to without a second going by out there. Naruto blinked a few times in rapid succession, confusion showing clearly in his eyes as he asked the obvious question. If we're in my mind, who are you two, and why are you here? Jenova's dark blue lips upturned in a serene smile, walking up beside Ultimecia and crouching down to Naruto's level, about 2 feet away from him. We were sealed inside here at the time of your birth, little one. The Yondaime, your father, had to protect the village from the Kyuubi. Unfortunately, both Ultimecia and I, Jenova, were seated atop the fox, clinging to it for our lives as it leapt around. After we were sealed, we put the fox out of its misery, since it went on a rampage due to unimaginable pain being inflicted upon it. Naruto's eyes widened, first at the shock that the Yondaime was his father, then at the fact that the Kyuubi was sealed inside him with these two ladies, then at the fact that they killed the demon fox, and finally at the knowledge that the Kyuubi wasn't to blame. It was just in horrible agony. So, the villagers only see me as the Kyuubi, right? Nobody had any knowledge that you were on top of it, so nobody knew you were in here. His eyes clouded in sadness, his thoughts straying to the depressing fact that they were locked inside of him. Ultimecia seemed to read his thoughts, reaching out and beckoning him to come closer, through the bars of the cage. Her fingers were about as long as Jenova's, but instead of claws, hers had long nails, about 2 inches off the tip of her finger. Do not worry. We aren't here to harm you, nor are we evil. You can come in here if you'd like, and I'll conjure another chair for you to sit in so we can discuss this. The boy's eyes widened at the blatant kindness, a foreign idea from anyone aside from the Hokage, but he only visited him when he was in the hospital. He walked through the bars, an odd feeling of a barrier passing over his skin as he walked up to them, staring up in suspicion, and slight hope at the kindness. Why are you two being so nice to me? Nobody is ever nice to me, unless they just want to hurt me more. The wisdom of experience, compounded with the child's sad tone, was almost heartbreaking. Jenova was the one to break the sad silence, wrapping her arms around the boy and pulling him into a hug, gently stroking through his dirt-ridden hair with loving ease. She paused a moment as he stiffened, as if waiting for the blow to come, and hugged him closer to her, sitting down in one of the comfy chairs with the child in her arms. We both know what it's like to be misunderstood. To be hated without reason. To be blamed for something you're not. We understand your pain, and that is why we wish to help you. We may never be able to escape the seal while it holds, but I think Ultimecia and I might have an idea of how to help you. But we can talk about that later. We've been watching your life for the past 4 years, and we'd like you to know that we do, indeed, care for you. You will never be a monster to us, for we have both felt what it's like to be labeled as such. Naruto could hardly believe his ears at this information, and broke down sobbing in Jenova's arms, crying out in relief and sadness, finally able to have someone to care for him for once. To actually care for him, and be with him. A second pair of arms wrapped around him, sharp nails careful not to hurt him as Ultimecia joined in the hug, a few tears gently dripping down her face. We can give you what neither of us had, a family. A loving family. Her voice was near his ear, and caused him to cry even harder, as the two women whispered soothing words in his ears, rocking him back and forth between them as he let out all his feelings. The walls seemed to brighten, the water evaporating slowly as his mind was gradually healed of all the pain of his life. A few hours later, but with time still stopped within the seal, they had gotten around to talking about how they would be able to help him. So, you're a sorceress who controls time and space. Naruto's voice was filled with childlike wonder. He had read in one of the books at the librarian was out to lunch so she couldn't throw him out, that the most powerful sorceress had compressed thousands of years into an instant, and destroyed the ancient technology so long ago. Ultimecia seemed to brighten that the blonde boy would be so interested in her field of work. She broke out into a small grin, eyes flashing with mischief. Not only that, but from absorbing all other sorceresses throughout time, I am the last sorceress on the planet. However, by doing that, I also picked up ice manipulation from Sorceress Edia, the ability to mold pure, primal magic from Sorceress Renoa, and the ability to manipulate magic into pure force from Sorceress Otto. I am Grand Sorceress Ultimecia, the one who cast the spell of time compression, which, although it caused large-scale devastation, I only wanted to save other sorceresses from the stigma that comes with the powers. The stereotype of the evil, maniacal, bloodthirsty magic-wielding women was unfounded and absolutely ridiculous. Most sorceresses actually started out good, but all the pressure caused them to lose their mind to the stereotype, becoming the very thing they never wanted to be. The child's eyes sparkled in absolute near fanboyism. Thankfully, he didn't let out a banshee squeal. His eyes widened a little as he recognized her from the story he read. "You're the one that cast time compression. Awesome." His voice echoed loudly off the walls, causing Jenova to wince a little at the volume and how close she was to the boy since she was holding him in her lap. Ultimecia was spared the pain since she was seated a few feet away in a cushy chair. She nodded a little, embarrassed that her spell that nearly destroyed the world was still remembered. "Yes. However, I would never cast that spell again. Not only was I caught in my own spell for what seemed an eternity, but I killed a lot of innocent people. The ends never justify the means. That is something I learned when held within time compression." Her voice had a hint of pure sadness and regret in it, clearly not wanting to think about all the lives she ended with that one spell. "And I, little one, am the alien being known as Jenova, the calamity of the heavens that descended on the planet thousands of years ago. However, I did not come here to destroy the planet. Unfortunately, the ancients didn't see that when I first arrived, and I was sealed away for thousands of years. Then I was unsealed, if only briefly, to be put into a large cylinder. I was experimented on by a twisted scientist named Hojo who was trying to create the ultimate warrior. He finally succeeded by injecting some of my cells into an unborn fetus, and created an evil man who tried to destroy the planet. I tried to take over his mind, using my cells as the anchor, but he went around that and took over my body to continue destroying lives for the sake of his mother, as he called me. Such a twisted boy, he was eventually killed, and I was lost within the lifestream, the blood of the planet, until one of the ancients' souls came to talk to me. It took them millennia to discuss it, but they allowed me back on the surface of the planet. In fact, that's actually how the Kyuubi attack started." Her voice trailed off here, a forlorn expression settling on her face, and twin tears dropping out of her mismatched eyes. "What happened?" The boy's voice sounded wary and slightly suspicious, hoping that neither of his two new family members caused the Kyuubi attack on purpose. "When I was released from the core of the planet, I was carried on a large surge of lifestream to the surface, which happened to be within the Kyuubi's cave. I landed on its back next to Ultimecia, but the wave splashed the demon fox. A little-known fact that has been lost to time is that the lifestream is extremely poisonous. All the souls of the dead flow through it, and all the thoughts they still possess are extremely confusing, and they build up in your head to a roar, causing intense pain. Even dipping one finger into it can give you a condition called Mako poisoning from the concentrated essence of life. Basically, the Kyuubi got soaked with a large wave of it, and got an absolutely horrendous case of Mako poisoning. Ultimecia and I were just along for the ride, since we couldn't escape. When we were sealed in here, we destroyed it to put it out of its misery." Jenova was almost trembling at this point, clearly feeling absolute regret and despair at possibly being the reason that the poor child's life was so horrid. Naruto thought about this for a minute, before wrapping both his arms around the alien and hugging her tightly, his voice muffled a little as he spoke to her. "Jenova-san, don't worry. It's not your fault. You and Ultimecia-san did the right thing. I'm sure that Kyuubi was relieved to finally have peace after getting that condition." Ultimecia and Jenova stood stock still as they learned their new nicknames, before both of them wrapped their arms around the small boy and hugged him tight enough to almost cut off airflow. "Thank you, Sochi," they both said at the same time. A few hours later, still no time passed on the outside. The sorceress and the alien were both discussing quietly, so as to not disturb the sleeping Naruto, on how they could help their new son. They had a few ideas, one being cast a combination of meteor and apocalypse on Konoha and just walk away, but that wouldn't help much, but it'd calm their anger at the village at least. Finally, Ultimecia brought up a plausible idea. What if he removed the seal, and we could dwell in his mind like guardian forces? He could summon us if he ever gets into trouble, and if he inherited your abilities, he'd be able to make clones of us and shove our consciousnesses into the clones, allowing us to walk around freely if he doesn't need us to battle. Jenova closed her eyes and tapped her chin with one fingertip, the other stroking through the golden locks of her sleeping son. That would work, but I'd have to warn him of what happens if he chooses to inherit my abilities. Would you be passing on your sorceress abilities to him, as well? I'm sure there's a way for you to pass at least part of them on without dying first, to give him a base of ice manipulation, time and space manipulation, force manipulation, and magic manipulation so that he can work his way up from there. That way you can teach him, and he won't get overloaded at the beginning and accidentally cast Apocalypse when his emotions run rampant. Ultimecia pondered on this for a few moments, before her lips spread in a wide grin, eyes sparkling in anticipation. Her voice, while still apathetic, was almost humming in contentment at the prospect. I'm sure I can do that, but we'll have to take him on a training trip. Sorceress abilities are governed by emotion, so his sadness could bring on a blizzaga, his anger bring on a flare, you get the idea. I think I heard them talking about how academy students are evaluated for genin at age 15. I'm sure in an 11-year span we can hone his emotional and mental control to the point where he doesn't accidentally cast a spell, or lash out with his body's cellular structure on instinct. That takes care of their ninjutsu and genjutsu capabilities as they call it. What about his hand-to-hand combat, or taijutsu, and his weapons combat, kenjutsu? A voice sounded in the seal, familiar to only one of the occupants. It was feminine, soft, and had a soothing aspect to it. I believe I can assist with that. Jenova's head whirled around so quickly, if she were corporeal, her neck would have snapped. Her eyes widened as she took in the transparent form of Eris Gainsborough carrying a large staff. The staff itself looked quite solid, with one small indentation in the middle of the shaft, where one would place their hands. The indentation looked small enough to carry a marble in it. The staff itself was about 6 feet long, with the final 2 feet in either direction thicker than most of the staff, giving it the ability to strike without breaking. The middle where one would hold it was also slightly thicker, allowing one to hold it in both hands without over or underhandling it. Jenova's voice faltered a little as she tried to take in the ancient, Ultimecia's eyes narrowing in suspicion at the intruder to the seal. Her eyes widened in recognition as Jenova spoke one word that set off her memory to the story Jenova had told her when they first met in the seal. Eris. The green-eyed woman smiled warmly, her eyes sparkling a little in sadness as she took in the two beings held captive to the seal, and the poor blonde boy still sleeping in the lap of Jenova. Yes, Jenova. I have come here to give my own present to the child. The successor of the sorceress legacy, and the calamity of the heavens. This was the first staff I ever used, and I carried it with me into the lifestream when I died. The prolonged exposure to the Mako energy has made it indestructible, and will help him channel his power as it once did for me. I have watched over him from the planet, and I am deeply regretful that he had to receive the same treatment both of you were given. I have come to give him the blessings of the ancients, to allow him to have a connection to the planet, to hopefully help him retain hope in humanity. I wouldn't have wished his treatment on even Hojo. A silver tear dripped from her eye as she recalled how the child was treated by his own village. Neglect, abuse, parents pulling their children away from him, not allowing them to play with him, to give them a lecture on how that child happens to be a monster. Ultimecia's eyes widened in astonishment as she tried to comprehend just what the ancient was offering to the boy. She walked over and gently tapped Naruto's shoulder, shaking him a little to wake him up so that he may have a say in his fate. The sun-touched boy woke up groggily to a slight shaking from his shoulder. He rubbed his eyes as he sat up in the lap of a woman, Jenova Kasan, his mind supplied. He opened his ocean blue eyes to look at the newcomer to the seal. He took in her long pink dress and red jacket, her medium height, and how her brunette hair was tied back in a loose twist. He saw a pink bow in her hair, the staff in her palms that was held perpendicular to her hips, and her warm green eyes. He immediately liked her for a reason that escaped him. She just seemed to exude kindness, serenity, and life, despite the fact that her transparency suggested she was just a soul, a ghost. "Who are you?" were the first words out of his mouth. He snuggled back against Jenova, hoping that the newcomer wouldn't want to hurt him. He may trust two people now, but that didn't mean he'd let down his defenses for others. The woman smiled sadly at him, walking slowly towards him and stroking a soft finger down his cheek. The sensation was odd, it felt like real flesh, warm and soft, yet there was something off with it. Despite the fact that it felt real, it also felt like a mixture of death and life. Quite a conundrum. A ghost that exudes life. Her voice was soft and soothing, immediately putting his mind at ease that she was, indeed, a friendly woman. "My name is Eris Gainsborough. I am an ancient of the planet, one who tends to the planet, heals it if it should be hurt. I am a protector, a healer. I was the last ancient of my time, a time when your cousin, Jenova, was being controlled by Sephiroth. I died saving the planet by praying for holy. I am here to give you the blessings of the ancients, should you choose to receive it. It would basically make you an ancient. One who speaks to the planet, protects it from those that wish to harm it, and heals its wounds. The ancients are the sheepherders of the souls of the lifestream. We guide the dead to reincarnation. I am also the one who spoke with your cousin in the lifestream, and helped her to come back to the surface. My reasons for offering the blessings are twofold. There are no ancients left alive after my time, and it would be nice to have another to tend the planet from the surface. The second reason is because I have also seen your treatment, and though I couldn't prevent it, I would like to make it up to you and hope that your faith in humanity is restored. That not all humans are as cruel as the villagers are to you. I believe your two cousins were also thinking of doing something special for you, as well. The boy's eyes widened, tearing up slightly at the thought of a third woman being kind to him. He thought a little on it, and his mind was made up quickly. Ultimecia and Jenova were still shell-shocked by the offer given to him to say anything just yet. If I were to accept your offer, would I be allowed to use the power to protect not only the planet itself, but also those who are precious to me? I don't want anyone else to live like Jenova cousin, Ultimecia cousin, or I have lived. Nobody should suffer that fate. Eris blinked a little startled at the wisdom and intelligence shown by the 4-year-old. Her smile was as radiant as the sun when she realized what he was asking, gently patting him on the head. Of course, that is one of the first and foremost principles of the ancients. We are protectors of those who cannot protect themselves. We are healers who soothe the wounds caused by humanity, whether it is to the planet, or to humanity itself. Jenova and Ultimecia finally broke out of their shock, offering their gifts to the child as well. Sochi, I would like to offer you my power as a sorceress as well. I would like you to use sorcery to protect instead of destroy as I have done. I wouldn't give you all my power, just enough to give you the basics in time and space, force, ice, and magic manipulation. I would teach you how to control your emotions and powers so that you don't accidentally release too much power. However, if you agree to my bargain, you must be warned. While Jenova and I will always be with you, you will need to find a sorceress, knight. The knight's job is to hold you to your sanity and personality, to prevent you from losing yourself to the power. The saying, absolute power corrupts absolutely, is abundantly clear for sorceresses. While Jenova and I can protect you somewhat, we cannot do it as well as a knight can. You will have to find a knight by the age of 18, or else your powers will surge out of control. Please think about this for a bit before you answer. Naruto's shock was compounded by the thought of not only having the powers of an ancient, but also that of a grand sorceress. I'm still calling him a sorceress even though he's male, cause she's a sorceress and is giving him power, therefore he's a sorceress, not a sorcerer. Plus it's funny. Jenova's voice brought him out of his shock, only to thrust him back into it once he realized what she was offering as well. Little one, I, too, would like you to carry on my legacy. My ability has no name, but it allows me absolute control over my cellular structure. While it sounds abstract in theory, think about the applications. You would be able to regenerate from even fatal wounds almost instantly. You would be able to melt yourself into a puddle of liquid, or freeze yourself into a block. You could increase the density of your skin cells, giving you literal nerves of steel. You would even be able to constantly move your organs around in your body, so that nobody would ever be able to predict where your vulnerable areas were. Of course, my favorite part is that you can grow tentacles out of your body for multitudes of reasons, from attacking, to movement, to defense. Unfortunately, if you accept my gift, you will never be able to die. You would be nigh immortal. To change your cells to be like my cells makes them unnatural to the lifestream, so you would never be able to be absorbed. If you were fatally wounded, even with my abilities, you would be dragged into the core of the planet to heal, before being rejected due to the alien nature of your body structure. With all three of these gifts sitting in front of him, the poor 4-year-old child did the only thing he could, faint. His eyes rolled back into his head, and he passed out in the lap of Jenova, startling all three women before they burst out giggling at his predicament. 3 hours later, after waking up, fainting again because he thought everything was a dream and waking up for a second time, Naruto asked for a little time alone to think about it all. About 2 hours later he walked back into the cage, where all three women were waiting patiently for his answer. I think I've come to a decision. His answer had all three, the ancient, the sorceress, and the alien on the edge of their seats. I accept all three of the offers. However, I believe I'll need to go on a training trip to fully control the powers. I wouldn't want to accidentally cause the classroom in the academy to explode because someone pissed me off. The three women glommed the poor boy, hugging him tightly with tears flowing out of their eyes. They were so overjoyed that he accepted the proposition that they didn't realize they were cutting off his air supply until he choked out a sentence. Can't breathe, air needed. All three hopped off, blushing a little. Eris held out her staff to the boy, who took it with a slight bit of confusion in his eyes. It was my first staff, the guard stick. I carried it with me when I died, and it's now indestructible and will help you channel your sorcery or ancient powers through it. I may have something to fill in that indentation, but that'll have to wait. Perhaps a present for later. She gave him a mischievous wink, which made him grin in return. Both Jenova and Ultimecia discussed it with each other for a little bit, before coming to a decision. Ultimecia stepped forward to tell him what to do so that they could give him the gifts. Sochi, to give you our gifts, you will have to tear off the seal. Doing so will allow us to walk freely. After you do that, we will become your guardian forces, living within your mind. Should you ever need to call on us for battle, just call us out, and we will exit and assist you in a fight. After you learn to fully control Jenova's ability, you will be able to create real bodies for us to live inside even when we aren't being summoned. If you ever need to talk to us, simply think it, and we will hear it. If you ever want to talk with us face to face, you simply have to meditate and we'll be here for you. Jenova stepped forward next and smiled at him, gently stroking his hair. I'm afraid my gift won't be so easy to give you, little one. I have to reconstruct every cell of your body, which means you'll be in a coma for 2 weeks until it's done. After which, we'll go on our training trip. Is that all right with you? The lucky child just grinned in return, scratching the back of his head sheepishly. He walked up and gave each of them a big hug around their legs, almost bouncing with happiness. I'm not too happy with the coma, but I'm sure it won't be too bad. Can I stay here with you and Ultimecia while I'm in the coma? And how will Eris help me train? Isn't she needed in the livestream to keep the souls going smoothly? The question caught the ancient off guard. She had forgotten that she was required to go back soon, so she pondered on it for a few moments before coming up with a solution. I can leave you scrolls on the different abilities and techniques the ancients use. I'm sure you'll be able to read soon, so once you can practice all you need. I'll come back on your 15th birthday to give you the final gifts I have for you. The boy smiled and gave the ancient another hug, nuzzling his face a little into the fabric of her pink dress. That sounds great. I'll miss you, though, Eris. The girl simply picked up the child and hugged him close to her, gently patting the back of his head. Don't worry. I'll always be with you. When you wake up from the coma, simply envision the staff that I gave you, and it will be transported into your hand. It is bound to you, now, as it was bound to me. Nobody can ever take it from you. Eris gently set the boy back down and waved cheerily to the sorceress, the blue-skinned alien, and the ecstatic child. She lifted her hands and, in a flash of white-green, a stack of scrolls appeared. She set them on a bookshelf near the monitor, before heading back to Naruto. These are all the techniques and powers of the ancients, as well as a little of our history. After you establish a link to the planet, you can ask the rest of them about their history. While most people are reincarnated, ancients stay within the lifestream to guide the souls. We may project our souls to the material world for a short time, as I have done here, but we are never truly revived. Good luck, Naruto-kun, and congratulations on finally finding people that accept you. With that said, the green-eyed ancient smiled and gently tapped Naruto's forehead, causing his eyes to flash the same color green as hers before she disappeared in a flash of green, leaving only the blessings of the ancients to Naruto, and a feeling of tranquility in her wake. Jenova nodded to Ultimecia, who released the stop spell on the seal, allowing time to continue traveling at a normal pace. Jenova picked up the emotionally drained boy, leaning the staff against the bookshelf, and sat down on a chair with Naruto in her lap to watch the outside world. In the real world, the Hokage appeared in a flash of smoke, and, seeing the mob attacking the child, called his Anbu. They quickly broke up the mob, taking some into custody. Quite a few of the Anbu seemed to turn a blind eye to the offenders, which the Hokage didn't seem to notice. He picked up the bloodied blonde boy, sadness sparkling in his eyes as he rushed to the hospital. A soft mumble was unheard to everyone else, but heard to those listening in the seal. Minato-kun, it seems I have failed in protecting your legacy. Please forgive me, Minato-kun. In the seal, Jenova and Ultimecia were shocked. Naruto was simply sad. Ultimecia summed it up pretty well in her own words, nearly spat out with enough venom to poison Orochimaru. You ask Minato for forgiveness, but you don't care about his son, do you, Sandaime-sama? The suffix was almost suffocating in mockery and disrespect. Naruto bowed his head, sniffling a little at the news. Oji-san didn't really care about me, he just didn't want to fail my father. Nobody outside you two and Eris Nichan see me as anything but me. The villagers see me as Kyuubi, Oji-san sees me as the Yondaime's legacy, and quite a few of the ninja probably see me only as the Kyuubi container. At that moment, Ultimecia lost her cool. Her eyes flashed a glowing gold color, the light no longer restricted to the iris, leaving her eyes as nothing but glowing golden orbs of color. She turned away from the monitor and materialized a large target dummy, obliterating it with apocalypse to vent her anger at. She finally calmed down, the light in her eyes receding to the iris before fading completely, leaving her eyes back to normal. That bastard, was all she seemed to say, not even acknowledging the fact that she materialized a target dummy and vaporized it in the same breath. Naruto was caught between awe and fear at his cousin's power, looking up at Jenova with a deadpan expression. Ultimecia-san is scary, Jenova-san. Jenova nodded numbly, a little in awe of both the stupidity of the village, and the power of her roommate. She looked down at her son and smiled a little, poking his nose with a fingertip. Little one, why don't you remove the seal so we can work on giving you our gifts? Naruto giggled a little, before nodding and hopping off of Jenova's lap. He jogged back to the cage bars, scaling up them easily from all his practice escaping villagers. He reached up for the seal and swiftly tore it off the bars, falling back to the ground as the cage simply disappeared into thin air without the seal to hold it. Ultimecia held out her hands and caught him in a gentle embrace before walking back to the chair and setting him in her lap to continue watching. She gently tapped both his temples, changing the boy's iris color to a permanent gold like her own. Jenova smiled and walked over, gently tapping his stomach where the seal used to be, causing a slight tingling sensation not unlike pins and needles to race through his entire body. She then walked off, calling over her shoulder with a smile. Little one, I'll be reconstructing your body for the next 2 weeks, so I'll leave you under the care of Ultimecia. She can teach you to control your emotions a little better since there's nothing else to do for now. I'll return when I'm done, so be safe, and don't blow anything up. The boy grinned cheekily at her, sitting in her abandoned seat across from Ultimecia, ready to learn fine control to assist with his newfound abilities. Real world. The Hokage had walked into the hospital room dedicated to Naruto, only to see no sign of the boy. Instead, in his place was a child about the same age, the same golden skin, but everything else seemed off. His hair was now a translucent silver white, and was no longer spiky, but fell flat against his head. It was about shoulder length, and was almost ethereal set against the boy's tan. The aged Hokage walked forward and gently lifted one of the boy's eyelids, stumbling backwards when a golden iris was revealed. He looked at the boy's charts, which said, Uzumaki Naruto. The old man pulled out his pipe and sat in a chair, smoking a bit as he pondered the cause of the changes. He wondered if, possibly, the fox had broken free of its bonds and was destroying the child. That thought lasted only long enough to remember the fox had blood-red fur, not white. He then wondered if perhaps it was a new bloodline emerging. Uzumaki Kushina never showed a bloodline, but neither did Namikaze Minato, perhaps one of them had a dormant bloodline. He'd have to talk with the council about this. He left the hospital room, missing the eye opening, flashing a bright gold, and then closing again to resume the coma. Council room. The clan heads, the village elders, and the civilian council were all assembled to ponder on this new change with Konoha's resident Jinchuuriki. Golden eyes and ethereal white hair, Hokage-sama. That sounds like no recorded bloodline I've ever heard of. Hyuga Hiyashi was the first to offer his opinion on the matter. He really didn't hold any particular grudge against the boy, He was purely neutral and acted as the voice of logic against the biased members of the council. The demon must be escaping. Kill it while it's weak, were the screams of the village council members, all non-shinobi. A few shinobi were also nodding their heads to the yells, however, like the Haruno clan head. Danzo, however, had other, more nefarious, ideas. Hokage-sama, with your permission, I would like to enlist Naruto-kun into my root forces. He would make an excellent weapon for the village, especially if he does have a new bloodline. The Hokage narrowed his eyes in suspicion at his old rival. His forces were directly subordinate to the disabled shinobi, and could be used against him. I believe we should wait until the boy awakens to see if he truly has a new bloodline, or if it is, by chance, just another act of the villagers to attack him. Were his words on the matter. After a few hours of deliberating, they all agreed to meet again when Naruto woke up, to discuss the boy's changes. 2 weeks later, a nurse burst into the Hokage's office, panting a little from the run, her cheeks flushed. She gasped out a sentence that had the aged man using Shunshin body flicker to get to the hospital as soon as possible. The boy has awakened, Hokage-sama. The hospital. Naruto was sitting calmly on the edge of the hospital bed, waiting for the Hokage to appear so that he could hurry up and leave the village for 11 years. Hopefully they'll forget that I ever existed once I'm gone. I think I'll reject my last name, seeing as how neither of you have one nor remember one, Ultimecia-kasen, Jenova-kasen. I'd rather carry your names instead of some woman that either died after giving birth to me, or ran off, believing her child to be the demon boy. Jenova's voice murmured inside his head, tired from her task of reconstructing his body from scratch. Don't worry, little one. We can simply call you Naruto, instead of Uzumaki Naruto, if you'd like. Be wary of your Hokage, young one, for I fear he may try to interrogate you about your newest changes. If he does try, allow one of us to take control so that we might escape. However, remind him that we will be back in 11 years' time. Naruto gave a slight mental nod, debating whether or not to even discuss it when he got back. He could pass it off as a bloodline, he supposed, but then he'd be recognized not as Naruto, but as that new bloodline. Yet another label he'd be recognized by instead of himself. His attention was diverted by a poof of smoke in his room, the Hokage appearing with a wary glint in his eyes. Naruto-kun, is that you? The boy simply gave an uncaring shrug to the man, his golden eyes flicking to meet the aged Hokage's brown eyes. Of course it's me, Hokage-sama. Who else would be in the demon's hospital room? The cold tone spoken by the 4-year-old shocked Sarutobi, almost taking a physical step back from the cold, apathetic golden eyes focused on him. He tried to reassert authority, so that the child wouldn't object to having to go with him. He was greatly unnerved at how the boy didn't yell out, "Ojii-san," and tackle him right away. Naruto-kun, I'm afraid we have to go to the council to discuss your changes. The boy's gaze intensified, and Sarutobi could have sworn that the room temperature dropped a few degrees as the cold eyes seemed to frost over with a glare. His voice was level, cold, and indifferent. Nothing that a 4-year-old should possess. No thank you, Hokage-sama. The suffix was spat with so much venom the Hokage really did take a step back. I am going on an 11-year training trip. I will not be back until the day of the genin exams. Is that acceptable, or will I have to circumvent your authority and escape on my own? The Hokage was almost positive this wasn't the same child he knew only a little over 2 weeks ago. Well, he didn't really know him, he just kind of watched through a crystal ball. The aged man was almost sure it had to be part of the seal that broke, seeing as how he was never like this before the mob. Surely the near-death experience must have broken part of the seal. The Sandaime looked over the boy suspiciously. He had changed a bit more within the 2 weeks he was hospitalized. The normally round cheeks had thinned out, giving the boy an aristocratic face with high cheekbones. The ethereal white-silver hair was even longer, stopping just below his shoulder blades, with 2 locks falling on either side of his face and just past his chin. The boy was a few inches taller, too, evening out around 4 feet 3, pretty tall for a 4-year-old. Naruto, I need you to lift your shirt for me. I'm going to check on something. The boy's glare seemed to drop the room's temperature even more, and the Sandaime could have sworn his breath rose in a mist. The child's tone chilled him to the bone, as he stood up from the hospital bed and walked slowly up to the Hokage. The boy's eyes started to glow a faint gold, startling the aged man. I think not, Hokage-sama. I removed the seal. Did you know what I found out? There was no Kyuubi. I was treated like trash my entire life for something that died hours after the sealing. The Hokage's eyes widened to the size of small plates at the news. The Kyuubi was dead. Yes, the Kyuubi is dead. It has been since a few hours after the sealing. Since you won't let me go willingly, I'm forced to escape on my own. You cannot send Hunter Nin after me. I'm not a shinobi. You cannot send Anbu after me. They aren't sent on recovery missions of civilians, Hokage-sama. The boy simply walked over to the wall, letting Ultimecia take over Naruto's body as he was about a foot away from it. She looked over Naruto's shoulder, giving the man the coldest glare possible without flash freezing the water vapor in the air. I'll be back in 11 years, Hokage-sama. With that last biting remark, the boy walked through the wall, causing a rippling effect on the wall that one would see if they dropped a rock into water, and then he was gone. What am I going to tell the council? Was the one thought running through Sarutobi's head. Council room. The demon escaped. Capture it. Kill the demon. Don't let it get away. Were just a few exclamations that followed after Sandame's grave news. Most were from the civilian side, but he could have sworn he heard a few ninja clan heads yelling too. Danzo, however, was fascinated by the ability the boy seemed to display. He walked through the wall and disappeared. Was it genjutsu? Ninjutsu? A bloodline? The Hokage sighed wearily, rubbing at his temples as he answered the question, shocking everyone in the room. No chakra was used. It was neither a genjutsu or a ninjutsu. I'm not sure about the bloodline, though. We'll just have to wait until he returns to ask him. Hopefully he'll be more forthcoming with his information when he arrives for the genin exams. Danzo's mouth curled up into a sinister grin. Soon, Naruto-kun, either you will work for me, or you will be eliminated. Training. Naruto appeared about 15 miles out in the middle of the Konoha forest, slipping out of a tree with the same ripple effect that he disappeared with. He searched around a little, making sure he was alone, before sitting at the base of the tree and speaking in his mind. Ultimecia-kasen, will that happen every time that I do that? It felt odd, kind of like a liquid form of whatever I stepped into out of brushing against my skin. It's kind of creepy when you feel something that feels like liquid bark brushing against you. The sorceress simply laughed in his mind, and he could have sworn he could feel the smirk coming from her. Don't worry about it, Sochi. It does happen every time. However, with all the training you'll be going through, you'll forget all about that odd sensation in favor of Ultimecia and Jenova's training bootcamp of doom, patented by yours truly. We'll be starting as soon as Jenova wakes up. I think I can hear her snoring. Until then, though, I want you to meditate and try to find your magical core. Once you find it, I want you to memorize every aspect of it. The texture, the feelings associated, the smell, anything that is memorable about it. You need to be able to contact it on instinct, otherwise spells will be useless due to taking too long to prepare. The boy paled considerably at the sound of the training's title. He sent a mental acknowledgement to his cousin, and held in a chuckle as a particularly loud snore accompanied with a snuffle echoed in his mind, Jenova turning over while sleeping on a couch near the monitor. He calmed his mind and thoughts, sorting through all the emotions and delving deep within his soul, searching for his magical core. After much prodding and poking around, he found it about 15 minutes later, silently shocking the sorceress. Amazing, it took me 2 hours to find mine, she thought to herself, taking a look along with her son at his magical core. To Naruto, his core felt like soft snow, and if he would envision it, he would probably say it felt like a marble-sized snowball. It felt almost pure in a way. Like nothing had ever tainted it. The feel of it was cool to his mental touches, instantly calming him as he made contact with it. It radiated a sense of peace and safety from within him as it pulsed gently. Further investigation of his core brought him deep into his meditation, deeper than where the seal was located. He opened his eyes, looking around at the new scenery. He was caught in a light snowstorm, yet he wasn't cold in the least. As he turned all around to take in the environment, he realized he was in a forest filled with white trees. They almost seemed dead, yet not, almost, sleeping, if possible. The snow was unable to cling to any of the branches, so it fell to a light layer on the ground. Naruto walked up to one of the trees and laid a gentle hand on the trunk, only to step back in amazement. The tree seemed to almost hum with untapped energy, as if it were a guardian in the midst of slumber. He walked slowly throughout the sleeping forest. Kudos to those who realized where he was, until he came upon a large pedestal in the middle of a clearing. It was surrounded on all sides by a deep, clear lake, and the only way to reach the pedestal was to hop across a few smaller stepping stones up to the main area. He jumped slowly and carefully across the stones, before reaching the pedestal, and looked all around. A slight shimmer in the air forced him to look up, and he watched with wide eyes as he saw an image suspended in the air. It was Eris, kneeling and praying in an area that greatly resembled the same pedestal he stood on. As he watched her pray, he noticed a spiky blonde guy come up in front of her, raise his sword, and almost bring it down on her head before backing up and clutching his head. Naruto continued to watch as a slight white-green glow started emanating from within Eris' pink bow. She lifted her head up to gaze at the blonde man with a slight smile on her face, causing Naruto to smile as well. Her smiles were almost contagious. The 4-year-old looked on in horror as a tall, silver-haired man descended from the air and stabbed a nodashi exceeding 6 feet in length through Eris' lower back and stomach, before pulling it out and letting her fall forward. The last thing Naruto saw before the image cut out was a small green marble escape Eris' bow, glowing a bright white green as it bounced down the stepping stones into the water. As the image faded, a small item dropped from above Naruto, halting its descent in front of his face and floating in midair. He reached out to touch it, and gasped in shock as it felt exactly like his magical core. Closer inspection of what he believed to be a tiny snowball showed that it was actually a multifaceted gem, with a multitude of colors splayed across its surface. Each color seemed to feel like something different. He felt the soothing cold of the snowstorm in the forest when he touched a light blue color. He could feel the passage of time and space when he tapped a dark violet color, a feeling of pure power from the green color, and tingling warmth from a pure white color. All of the colors seemed to blend together at the edges, leaving no hint of where one color began and the other ended. He inspected it for a while longer before he got up to leave. Before he hopped back across the stepping stones to the forest below, he knelt on the altar pedestal and prayed for Eris, hoping her sacrifice wasn't put to waste. As he bounded back to the forest, he realized that Ultimecia was calling for him, and brought his mind back from the deep meditative state he had fallen into to hear her worried calls. Naruto, are you alright? You're not supposed to delve that deeply into your core yet. Please come back. He was startled by the amount of emotion that she was showing, seeing as how normally the woman was indifferent, only showing a slight bit of warmth to him, but never this much worry. Ultimecia-san, I think I found my core. This statement, of course, prompted a rather long discussion of the dangers of slipping into deep meditation without first warning one of his Kasans so that they could protect him if he were caught unawares. After a thorough description of his core, and what he saw there, he stood back up, noting absently that over 3 hours had passed since he had started meditating, and started to wander further into the forest to set up camp, ready to train his small body to the brink for the next decade or so. The next day, after waking up, collecting some fruits and berries that were deemed non-poisonous by both his Kasans, and washing up, Naruto was ready for the training. They decided that his training with Ultimecia would start first, starting with learning how to read fluently while tapping into the energies of each facet of his core. While Jenova and I start teaching you how to read, I want you to focus on our task while using your subconscious to pull small tendrils of power from each facet of your core, one by one. Really small tendrils. Think hair thin. Let the hellish control exercises commence. 1 month later, Naruto had learned how to read quite fluently and was now studying the scrolls that Eris had left him. While doing so, he was doing the next step of Ultimecia's control exercises: punch a tree, and hit every single leaf that falls with a tendril of power, alternating between time and space, ice, force, and pure magic. The poor leaves were in for quite a rough day, though their reactions to the magic were quite interesting. The ones tapped with the time and space tendrils would slow down or hasten their descent, the ice ones would freeze over in a light rim frost, the force ones would either be blown off course or would explode in pretty colors, as Naruto adequately described it, while the pure magic ones would do a multitude of things, ranging from incinerating, becoming drenched, having small lightning sparks play across it, and one even evaporated in a green mist. Ultimecia's exercises were quite intense, but they were required for him to get a good grasp on his sorceress powers. As she had said before, once you can successfully call upon the essence of any one of your powers at will and on instinct, you'll never be caught unawares by others. Her exercises were also required for Jenova's abilities. The ability to mold your cells to your will requires extreme amounts of control, so he would have to be able to cast basic spells at will without halting before he could start to learn her abilities. 3 months later, Naruto had learned all of the basic level spells, and was still working on molding the pure essence of his different elements to his will without a spoken word. Ultimecia had applauded his perseverance, stating that the easier it is for him to mold the pure essence of his magic, the quicker, more powerful, and more controlled his spells would be. He was currently trying to establish a link to the planet, so that he might be able to talk to Eris. He knelt in the middle of a small clearing of trees, clearing his mind and trying to project his thoughts down to the planet's core. What he didn't realize was that flowers were beginning to bloom around him, and the closer that he got to the lifestream, the larger the bloom was. He finally was able to make contact, which he was sure of, seeing as how he could hear a gentle murmur in the background and could feel a pulse, like a heartbeat, coming from below him. A soft voice interrupted his thoughts, almost making him jump for joy. Naruto-kun, I see you've been able to reach me here within the planet. Congratulations. From now on, you will be able to talk with the souls of the deceased. Should you choose to. The link is absolutely permanent, from the time you initiate it to the time you die. After relaying the news to Jenova and Ultimecia, who sent waves of happiness through his mind, along with what he could swear felt like both of them doing a victory dance, he went back to his training, resolving to only talk to Eris when he really needed her, seeing as how she was busy being a sheepherder to souls and all. 8 months later, age 5. After mastering the next level of spells, Naruto's control had shot through the roof. He could probably pass a genin or a chunin in pure control. Today was his birthday, October 10th, and his cousins knew just what to get him. From Jenova, he learned he was going to learn her ability starting the next day, since his control is good enough for the more straightforward abilities of the cell manipulation. From Ultimecia, she boosted his magic levels a little higher in all areas, telling him it was time for the first transformation of the sorceress. Sochi, your studies in magic have come far, and I believe you're ready for the first of 3 transformations of the sorceress. Every sorceress goes through at least one, depending on how powerful they become. The strongest, like me, have gone through all 3. The first will boost your physical strength as you get older, as well as some cosmetic changes. For instance, your lip color might change, or your fingernails might sharpen. Ultimecia-san, why would a sorceress need physical strength? I thought we mainly blasted enemies away with our magic. He could swear the evilness of her smirk would have made Orochimaru squeal like a schoolgirl and run away crying. Sochi, I never told you just how physically powerful sorceresses are, have I? Sorceress Otto was one of the strongest, and she was able to backhand her enemies away from her without ever having to waste time casting a spell. I believe her best record was a finger flick that not only completely liquefied the poor man's skull, but also sent him flying over 100 feet before he smashed into a wall. Naruto shuddered at the thought, before grinning evilly in response. Can I do that too, Ultimecia-san? Please. The Grand Sorceress was powerless to stop the chibified Naruto, watery puppy eyes and all, so she did the only thing she could do, summon herself into the material realm and squeeze him senseless with a bone-breaking hug. Ah, I'm sure you'll be able to do that. But first, let the sorceress transformation begin. With that said, she disappeared back into his mind to start off the transformation. Seeing as how he wouldn't be able to do much until the change was complete, he meditated some more and talked with Jenova on how cellular manipulation would be. I'm sure that the phasing ability you have used will have nothing on the absolute weirdness that cellular manipulation invokes on the user. Whenever I mold my cells into tentacles to attack my enemies, it feels like my body is stretching like taffy. Moving vital organs around your body to avoid fatal damage is very disorienting as well. However, the first thing we're going to work on is compressing and molding your muscle tissue and joints. We're going to make you more flexible, and compound the physical strength your sorceress powers will give you. The transformation took about an hour, and when Naruto looked at his reflection in a nearby lake, he grinned wide. His lips had changed into a blue color to match that of Jenova, and he could see the beginnings of tattoos forming on his face, and if the odd itching feeling he was getting down his chest and legs, he would hazard a guess that they were beginning there, too. His fingernails had sharpened a little, but not too much, so they weren't dangerous, yet. After testing his physical strength by punching a tree, causing it to shake violently before toppling over, he went back to his training. 3 years later, age 8. Over the past 3 years, Naruto had worked harder and harder on all his different abilities. He was currently working on learning the powerful Aga spells, and was staying far away from the forbidden magic. He wasn't quite ready for it yet until he was older. He was now able to manipulate his bone structure and muscular structure, and had hardened his bones to make them almost unbreakable, while compressing the musculature to make his body very light and build. He was about 5 feet 3 inches now, his hair reaching down to his lower back. He wouldn't allow it to grow farther than that, saying any farther and it may be a liability either in sitting down or in a battle. He had moved from the Konoha forest after a genin team nearly discovered him, and was now living within the forest of death. The only person that ever went there was that crazy snake-like lady, as he called her, Mitarashi Anko. He had a near run-in with her when she was having her playtime, as she called it in the forest. He was meditating at the base of a tree while flaring his different elements at intervals at anything that came close. She had caught him unawares, and his time and space magic flared in response, putting her into a stasis as he made his escape by phasing through thin air to appear a few miles away. Yet, even that far away wasn't enough to escape the enraged yell that echoed through the forest, scaring birds in a large diameter. "Who the fuck paralyzed me? I'll feed them to my snakes." Naruto had also started to learn how to use his staff in combat. The blunt force and large reach, coupled with his insane strength, were quite a combination. Thankfully, Ultimecia knew a little about the staff, so she was helping him create a fighting style. 3 years later, age 11. Naruto heavily studied anatomy with both Ultimecia and Jenova after a slight mishap where he messed up his cell manipulation and happened to create tentacles with eyeballs on them on accident. Jenova thought it was interesting, and thought it might help in combat if he could find a way to make sure the eyeball wouldn't be a weakness, seeing as how the sensitivity would be a crippling failure. He had studied the human body in such great detail to the point where he could hit a target from 50 feet away, in the center of the bullseye with an ice senbon with a 100% accuracy rate. He was applying his knowledge of anatomy to further his control in his healing abilities, as well as his destructive capabilities. He could cast a fire spell and have it burn from the inside out of a target's vital organs, instead of being restricted to simply trying to set them on fire. He was able to replicate Eris' healing wind ability, if only barely. It really wasn't for combat, unlike hers. He would flow the healing aspect of his primal magic affinity through a weak wind current, and bend the wind to his will to make sure every part of the body was healed equally. He also recreated her Breath of the Earth ability, supercharging his hands with healing magic and sending shock waves through the body to burn away all negative effects. Unfortunately, it was a rather jarring process to the body, and the person would have to spend a day in bed for their immune system to stabilize from going from sick mode to absolutely fine mode. He was making great strides in his time and space magic, being able to adjust the stop spell to recreate Eris' seal evil ability. He would weave a web with one, binding the full body with it, while he compressed a second stop spell that would halt the vocal cords from working for a longer time than the first stop would hold, effectively negating any calls for help. His force magic was coming along well. He was careful to stay away from the highly destructive flare spell, and was working on applying force as a barrier, something that Otto never thought about. He was currently able to create a moderately powerful protect spell, able to stop falling trees, thrown kunai, or as he recently found out, a cat named Tora on a warpath. That last one was severely straining the power of the spell, though, so he had to escape before the cat could break through. His primal magic manipulation was also coming along well, able to cast the Aga spells about 3 times a day before they tired him out. He was currently working on a theory with Ultimecia on the possibility of compressing them into a smaller area to increase the devastation against a single target. Instead of flash freezing the surface of a 30-foot diameter before shattering it, completely freezing a smaller, 6-foot diameter area, inside and out so that the shatter would, at the very least, cause internal damage. His ice manipulation was by far his best aspect. He no longer needed to say the name of the spell, he could simply mold the magic into whatever form he needed. Words were unnecessary, and his creativity was the only limit to what he could do with ice. He frequently juggled large pointy ice objects in the air and flung them at each other, trying to hit the very tips of the objects, so that he might be able to deflect or block thrown weapons with replicas made out of ice. He had also begun to experience some rather odd dreams, which he joined Jenova in being absolutely baffled by. Ultimecia, however, had a hard time keeping her maniacal laughter to herself whenever the subject was brought up. She finally conceded to telling him what it was about once he turns 13. 2 years later, age 13. Naruto had grown up quite well from all his training. His hair was just as soft and shiny as Jenova's, with odd metallic silver streaks through it, courtesy of his second sorceress transformation. His golden eyes had gotten a little brighter, yet were frosted over with a perpetual apathetic look. His emotions had to be under complete control until he could find a knight. Not even a sneeze could make him lose his iron hold on his emotions, or else something was liable to explode from his magic. The tattoos that started from his first transformation were growing to look like an almost exact duplicate of Ultimecia's, from the facial zigzags to the almost tribal designs making their way down his legs. Unlike Ultimecia's, though, his were all colored different shades of gray. They weren't completely finished forming, either. The zigzags stopped about 2/3 of the way down his face, showing that he still needed another sorceress transformation to complete them. He was about 5 feet 8 inches now, as tall as Ultimecia. His body would be one that would be seen on either a dancer or a swimmer, with lean muscle all over. He finally was able to improve his control on Jenova's cell manipulation techniques, and used that to create his own clothes, saying that, "I don't trust those women in the clothing stores to take my measurements without copping a feel." His attire consisted of a black loose-fitting silken gi, with wide sleeves that ended just after his fingertips, hiding them from view to surprise enemies. He could also conjure ice elemental weapons into his hands and hide them while in their sleeves, adding another surprise. His pants were a pair of black hakama, ending just above his feet, which were barefoot, for good reason. After his second sorceress transformation, his fingers became longer, the nails sharper to the point where they could be classified as claws. They extended about an inch past the fingertip. His tattoos had lengthened, his physical and magical strengths were amplified, and his connection to the planet had been strengthened. He could now channel the lifestream in a passable imitation of Eris, pulse of life technique to regenerate even the most grievous of wounds, but the exposure to the lifestream, even if only barely, would force him to only use the ability once a week, due to danger of Mako poisoning if he used it more often. A final change to the transformation was that his toenails became as sharp and as pointed as his fingernails, eliminating the possibility of shoes, or even sandals. Naruto was wandering through the country of mist, saying he needed to explore areas outside of a forest and see how different environments affect his spellcasting capability. When Jenova questioned him about why they were going to mist, Ultimecia finally broke down giggling uncontrollably at Naruto's answer. "I don't know, I just feel as if something or someone is calling me there." Of course, she finally broke down and told him what his feeling was about when he threatened her with walking through a populated town. The absolute terror that is fangirls, as well as the lesser-known terror known as fanboys, would be all over him. Your dreams and instincts are guiding you to your most likely candidate for a sorceress knight, Sochi. If you follow the feeling long enough, you will meet him or her. I guess this would be a good time to give you the talk. You see, when a man loves a man, or a woman loves a woman, or a man loves a woman, or whatever. About 3 hours later, after profuse blushing, perverse comments from Jenova, maniacal laughter from Ultimecia, and a slight nosebleed, Naruto had the talk down. But he was confused about one thing. "Ultimecia-san, why are you telling this to me now?" The perverse giggle from Jenova, feeling her lecherous smirk, and the slight snicker from Ultimecia in his head set off warning bells and sirens, telling him he really shouldn't have asked. Little known fact about sorceress knights is that they are usually in a, rather intimate, relationship with their sorceress. "I hope they're attractive, Sochi. I think Otto killed her knight because he was an ugly, fat man with an unnerving fetish for gelatin." Naruto shuddered violently at the implications, praying to the planet that he wouldn't get an ugly night. He prayed so hard that it actually went through the link, causing Eris and the other ancients to break out into hysterical laughter. 6 months later, age 13.5. Naruto was following the maddening instinct to keep walking in a certain direction, tempted to just teleport as far as he could to see if it got him any closer, when he finally ran across 2 people. One was a rather androgynous-looking individual, about his age or a year older. They had long, sleek black hair and were wearing a rather effeminate pink kimono with flower patterns. They were currently picking a few herbs off the ground, which his mind immediately supplied as medicinal in nature. They were a few inches shorter than Naruto, and moved with the grace of one trained for fighting, yet he could tell the person was more of a pacifist and a healer by nature. The second was most definitely a man, given the fact that he was only wearing a vest over his shirtless torso, with gray-black shinobi pants and a pair of blue shinobi sandals. He had bandages wound around the lower half of his face, seemingly as a makeshift mask. His torso and chest were also heavily bandaged, though the lack of redness indicated the wounds were closed. He gave a violent mental shudder when Ultimecia piped up, telling him that, though Otto was a woman, she looked like a 7-foot-tall, purple-tinged muscular man. The man looked to be around late teens to early 20s, and was leaning against a large zanbato, about 6 feet in length and about 1 in width. Some kanji near the handle labeled it as Kubikiri Houcho, head chopping cleaver. Naruto gave a slight start as he realized the feeling ended in this clearing, meaning one of the 2 were great candidates to be his knight. He announced his presence by snapping a twig underfoot, causing both to whip their heads around in his direction as he stepped out of the tree line, holding his hands up in a peaceful gesture. I do not come here to harm you. I was following an instinct I had and it led me here. Both narrowed their eyes in suspicion, the androgynous one moving forward to stand in a defensive position in front of the larger man. The larger man winced a little as he picked up his sword, some bandages previously started to redden as wounds were reopened. The androgynous one spoke first, an edge in their soft voice which, unfortunately, didn't give away their gender yet. Naruto gave a mental snicker as Jenova muttered a, "Damn," and glared at Ultimecia who had bet that the voice would be just as androgynous as the rest. "Who are you, and why are you here?" Naruto sat down next to a tree trunk, not making any sudden movements to provoke the pair. He answered as he sat down, hands shifting back into their sleeves before either person could realize his condition. "Like I said, I came here on an instinct. Something here was calling to me, and I've been following the damn annoying thing like a beacon for the past half-year. It seems to end here, so I guess it would have to be one of you 2 that were calling out to me." Both people looked thoroughly confused at the tattooed teen's answer, but before they could ask, the larger one gave out a hacking cough and fell to his knees, coughing up blood into his bandage mask. The androgynous one gave a panicked cry, running over to the large man and trying the best they could to help heal the wounds with what limited medical knowledge they knew. "Zabuza-san, you should be resting. Your wounds have reopened." Naruto stood up and glided soundlessly across the clearing, kneeling down next to the man. At such a close range, he could tell the man was nearly fatally wounded, so he did the one thing he could. He started to concentrate, the wind picking up around him into a gentle zephyr as he poured shimmering white healing magic through the wind to heal the man's wounds. Both Zabuza and the still unnamed androgynous one looked up in shock as Naruto's eyes glowed softly, the white wind easily regenerating all the lost flesh. Naruto gave a wry smile as both of them turned to him, showing off his larger-than-normal canines. His eyes stopped glowing as he sat back on the grass, feet hidden skillfully by the hakama so as to not shock them. "Like I said, something was calling for me to come here." Both people were shell-shocked that, not only did this stranger seem to home in on them like a hound, but he came simply on instinct and healed Zabuza without even asking why he was wounded. The larger man spoke first with a gruff, powerful voice, carefully unwinding the bandage mask and showing off his rather pointy teeth. "Haku, I think he really doesn't mean to hurt us, although, how were you able to heal me like that? Not even med nins can heal that quickly or precisely. There's not even a scar." Haku nodded his head, sitting back near Zabuza to listen to what Naruto was going to say, checking all the bandages to make sure none of the wounds were left unhealed. "Well, my name is Naruto, and you," he pointed an elegant, clawed fingertip at the larger man, "are Zabuza of the Mist, correct?" And you, I would presume, are Haku. He pointed at the androgynous boy next, who nodded politely with a small smile. The man nodded numbly, staring openly at Naruto's fingers, or more precisely, the fingernails. Well, I suppose I owe you both an explanation. You see, I'm one of the last of my kind. We were known as sorceresses. Yes, even the male ones. Anyway, you may have heard of our kind before. Zabuza and Haku both had wide eyes as they stared at the teen, nodding a bit and inching away a little, since all that they heard about sorceresses was the stereotype, and the event of time compression was caused by a sorceress. Naruto gave a sad smile at the two, placing both his hands into his sleeves and settling back against a nearby tree to get ready to tell a simplified version of the story. Well, not all you heard was good, I'm positive. However, I must tell you both that almost no sorceresses are evil. Misjudged, yes, but not ever truly evil. Time compression was cast by a sorceress who wanted to prevent the judgmental nature of humanity from affecting any more sorceresses. She had grown up hated and despised for simply being who she was. I suppose you could liken it to the bloodline wars, only much more concentrated. Most sorceresses start out good, but either lose themselves to their power, or to the pressure of society. However, since there hasn't been a sorceress in a long time, I'm almost positive nobody would remember much of us. Just the event of time compression, I suppose. Anyway, I'm getting off track. I am a sorceress, and I was following my instincts to find a knight. Do you know what a sorceress knight is? Both Haku and Zabuza looked quite confused at this, screwing up their faces in concentration as they tried to remember anything on the subject. Surprisingly, it was Zabuza's gruff voice that spoke first, still slightly suspicious at the golden-eyed teen. Aren't they the ones who help guard the sorceress? Naruto's eyes sparkled mischievously, and both nins were sure they weren't going to like the answer. Yes, they do help guard the sorceress, but their main job is actually more of a support beam. I'm sure you heard the saying, absolute power corrupts absolutely. The saying holds very true for sorceresses. A knight is their support to lean on, and helps them hold onto their original personality and goals, not allowing them to become corrupted. On a side note, they're usually intimate with the sorceress. Haku blushed a deep red at the last part, while Zabuza snickered a little with a slight perverse blush across the bridge of his nose. Due to my unusual circumstances, I'll be able to go knightless until I'm 18, but then my powers will start to rage out of control. My instincts led me here, and probably to you, Zabuza, to find a good candidate for a knight. I know this is quite a lot to think about, so I believe I'll take my leave tomorrow, and let you consider the proposal for a year or so. Being a knight to a sorceress is a full-time task. While I can defend myself adequately, you'd have to be able to hold me down emotionally so that I didn't, for example, lose myself to my anger and destroy a city with a burst of magic. You'd have to be around me almost all day, not to mention the intimate part. Naruto looked away in slight embarrassment, giggling a little nervously. Zabuza was just sitting there, staring off into the distance, as he tried to fully comprehend what was being asked of him. He finally snapped back to reality when Haku was poking him in the shoulder, trying to get his attention. He looked deep into Naruto's molten gold eyes and saw no lie, and gave a grin, shaking his head a little side to side. He finally spoke up, evidently a little uncomfortable. I'll think about it. While I'm comfortable with my bisexuality, I'm a little uncomfortable with the age difference. You can't be older than 14, and I'm already 20. Not to mention I'm a nuke nin of the mist, so I wouldn't be very welcome in your village. Plus, I'd be taking Haku with me, seeing as how he's my apprentice. Naruto gave a wide grin, eyes sparkling a little. He stood up slowly and stretched, before turning his attention back to the two nuke nin. Like I said, I'll give you a year or so to think about it. Don't worry about me if you decline, I'll still have another few years to find a knight. As for the nuke nin thing, if Konoha doesn't want to be wasted by a large meteor impacting into the Hokage Tower, they'll have to let you in. I can't be anywhere without my knight, and I'm sure they'd just love to have Haku there. Or else. He laughed a little maniacally at this, his voice sounding menacing despite its softness. Both nuke nin felt a slight chill run up their back as they saw flickers of emotions flash through his golden eyes, not wanting to learn what the else would be. He gave another warm smile to them, instantly placating their fears, before gliding along the forest floor towards Zabuza, giving him a soft kiss on the cheek. I'll return on my 15th birthday. Do not worry, I'll be able to find you. My instincts will lead me towards you. If you decide to reject the offer, I'll look for another night. And don't worry if you accept. I'd rather take a relationship slowly, so there's no rush. He gave a slight smirk at Zabuza, trailing a clawed fingertip gently down his cheek without drawing blood, causing a tingling sensation to ripple down the man's spine. Bye, Haku, and farewell, Zabuza-kun. He drew out the syllables of his name with a mischievous wink before walking up to a tree and walking through it, disappearing altogether with a familiar ripple effect on the trunk. Zabuza sat there, spaced out with a hand to the cheek that was touched, and a lecherous grin slowly spreading across his face, ending with a perverted giggle. Haku's jaw was touching the ground at the audacity of the male sorceress. Although, he thought, I can see how that boy would be able to be a great match for Zabuza-san. He's dangerous, yet neither bloodthirsty nor arrogant. And he was able to heal his wounds so masterfully. Haku's coherent thoughts ended here when he squealed mentally, going starry-eyed at the healing prowess of the sorceress. Zabuza's thoughts were a little more serious than his disposition was showing. I could both get a home for Haku and myself so that we no longer need to escape Hunter Nins, and I'd be able to settle down with someone. I'm sure both of us would still be doing our ninja duties, and we'd be forced to pair together on missions due to the nature of his magic, but he doesn't seem too bad. I'm sure I saw a flicker of concern within his eyes when he was healing me. He doesn't seem the type to get an inflated head from the power, either. Naruto, Very interesting, I'll have to think on your offer. 1 year later, age 14.5. Naruto was on his way back to Konoha for the Genin exams. All the training in the past year had been on control and power, and how to compress his spells. The theory he worked out with Ultimecia turned out to be able to work. He was now able to cast all the spells in his arsenal without losing control. However, he enacted self-restrictions on the spells he would use. He wouldn't use the forbidden magic unless it was absolutely required. He was highly proficient with the staff, and had created his own fighting style for not only the staff but also for his hand-to-hand combat. They both focused on direct, crippling blows aimed at the joints, though the hand-to-hand style was mainly focused on jabs instead of punches due to his claws. That, coupled with his insane physical strength which could now match Tsunade, well, let's just say the joints will never be the same again. His ice manipulation had hit the point of mastery, where he had absolute control over it. He was able to recreate Edia's famous ice strike attack, and had improved the javelins she threw, as well as improved their throwing power, distance, and accuracy. His force manipulation was approaching the point of mastery. After meeting with Zabuza a year ago, he had realized just how easy it is for humans to get horribly wounded, and threw himself into mastering force to protect those close to him. Naruto had learned how to compress his flare into a small area, obliterating everything, including the atoms within it. His barriers were incredibly strong, and he was able to create a spell that melded reflect, shell, and protect all in one. He used it over the standard wall spell, since it basically was the same. Instead of a shield against magical attack, as well as physical, he changed the magical structure of the barrier. He meshed the protect and shell parts a bit more thoroughly, creating a prismatic colored pentagon, and then faceted the entire thing, causing any non-physical projectile attack to be reflected in a random direction off of one of the facets. His time and space as well as primal magic manipulation were about even. He could possibly hold his own against Ultimecia if she didn't use forbidden magic against him, since she was far more experienced with those. And if she used Apocalypse, well, no contest. His cell manipulation was also mastered, so that he now constantly rotated his organs in chaotic directions. He had been doing this for the past half-year consciously, and finally had it mastered to the point where he was doing it even when not thinking about it. He was also able to create clones by modifying a tentacle, creating an entire working body before detaching it from him. He used these to allow Ultimecia and Jenova out of his mind, which allowed him to spar against them to hone his abilities in a more combat-oriented way. The two of them preferred the comfort of his mind, however, and only came out to spar. A lot of the year was spent sparring with one or the other, as he wasn't good enough for both at once yet. He had grown a little bit taller, ending up around 5 feet 10 inches. He believed he would naturally stop growing at around 5 feet 11 inches, but he supposed he could use his cell manipulation to become as large as Otto if he wanted to, though he still shuddered to think about how a woman could look like that. He kept his GI and Hakama outfit, and after walking around a clothes shop avoiding fangirls and fanboys outside, he had found a new type of cloth that he thought was perfect for him. It was 3 layers, on top was silk threaded with tiny metal threads to give it more resilience, the middle was a metal fishnet for more resistance, and the bottom was an absolutely heavenly feeling silk to provide comfort for the body. After inspecting how the cloth was created, he altered his cells to recreate the effect on his clothing as well, though he had to put up with both Ultimecia and Jenova muttering, "Cheapass," when he didn't buy the clothing. He was truly looking forward to his 15th birthday. Not only would he possibly get a night and have a relationship with someone outside the familial ties to Jenova, Ultimecia and Eris, but Ultimecia said he was going to go through the final sorceress transformation on his birthday as a gift. Jenova also reminded him that Eris may be stopping by in soul form on his birthday to give him her present. All in all, he was quite happy while walking down the path towards Konoha. As the gates rose in the distance, he contemplated teleporting in, but supposed it would be less of a chance of causing the Sandaime a heart attack if he simply walked through the gates. However, if he sent Anbu after him, well, he supposed he could use them as lawn ornaments if he petrified them. As he walked up to the gates, yet still out of sight of the guards, he created a hood matching the color of his GI and pulled it over his head. He placed both his arms into his wide sleeves to hide the nails and walked a little slower to avoid showing off his feet. The Chunin at the gate was having a boring day. Nobody ever seemed to come up to the gate and he was steadily drifting off to slumber in the middle of his shift. Soon, a shadow started to form over the horizon, materializing in a tall man with a black hood covering most of his face in shadow, a black GI with wide sleeves, and black hakama hiding his feet. The only discernible feature were the 2 locks of white-silver hair hanging on either side of his face, ending a little past his chin. As the Chunin saw him coming closer, he called out to him. "Halt! State your name and business in Konohagakure." He could feel the smirk coming from the man, and it set him on edge slightly. A draft of wind blew up into the hood, revealing piercing golden eyes for a moment before it dropped back into place. The stranger spoke in a soft voice that radiated power, causing the Chunin to wonder just how powerful he was to hide his presence like that. "My name is Naruto, and I'm back from my 11-year training trip. I would like to speak with the Hokage. Genin exams and missions." The Chunin's eyes widened a little in slight recognition of the name, although without the surname he wasn't sure where he had heard it before. The lack of golden hair and blue eyes also allayed his fears that the demon brat was back. He nodded to the teen, signaling a Chunin that was on duty to escort unknown visitors to the Hokage. The second Chunin dropped down a few feet in front of Naruto, nodding to him before starting to walk off towards the Hokage tower, with the cloaked boy in tow. As they passed through the bustling streets, Naruto had to hold in a snort of derision at all the curious and slightly odd looks he was receiving. As if they'd act that way if they knew who I was, this is actually almost worse than sneering. Ah well, at least I haven't been swarmed by people, yet. Although, once they know who I am, I'm sure they'll give up the chase and pretend they never were squealing about the demon. As if on cue, a piercing shriek echoed across the entire village, followed by the sounds of stampeding women, all echoing the same sound at different pitches. Sasuke-kun. The mere sound of it caused Naruto to shudder violently in sympathy for the poor boy that would soon be hunted like prey. He pitied the poor soul who was victim to the absolute horror that was fangirls. Naruto started to speed up discreetly, hoping to avoid the stampede of raging women chasing after their dream boy, trying hard to shake off the fear gripping his heart. Inside his mind, both Jenova and Ultimecia were curled in fetal positions, having terrible flashbacks to one of the times that he was almost caught by the rabid horde of women in a large town. Soft mumbles and whimpers could be heard from both of them as they shivered violently, clinging to each other in hopes that they'd never have to experience it again. Soon enough, the Chunin had led the boy all the way to the Hokage tower, leaving him at the door. Naruto nodded his head politely to the man before walking in, telling the secretary that he needed to meet with the Hokage. He then sat down to wait for an opening in the aged man's schedule. 30 minutes later, Naruto was deep in meditation at this point, having decided to have a discussion with his two cousins on what to tell the Hokage, and how to explain his abilities without enacting the Clan Restoration Act, which would force him to impregnate legions of women to try to spread his bloodline. He couldn't go into the council room and just say, "I'm a sorceress," because that would be even worse. Either they'd try to dissect him to try to find what makes a sorceress tick to try to replicate their abilities, shun him even more since then he'd be both the demon brat and the evil witch, or they'd try to enact the CRA, hoping it'd be a genetic trait. He finally decided to tell the Hokage that he was, indeed, a sorceress. He would give the old man one more chance to hold on to his trust, and if he betrayed it, no more chances. He was sure the wizened man would agree to tell the council that it was a bloodline ability, negating the annoying Uchihas and their thieving eye abilities, avoiding the possibility of being ordered to teach someone his skills, and being able to explain his lack of hand seals. If the council tried to pull the CRA on him, he'd just say he was sterile, and that his bloodline would die with him. He held in his instinctual reflex to blast whoever tapped him on the shoulder, rousing him from his meditative state. He looked up at the woman, not that she'd notice as she couldn't see his eyes. She smiled politely at him, telling him that the Hokage was ready to see him. Naruto nodded his cloaked head to her before ascending the staircase, making not even a slight sound as he moved. Hokage's office. Sarutobi was having a bad day. Today was the day that Naruto was coming back, or so he had said, so he would have to put up with the council trying to either incinerate the boy with glares alone, or try to train him into a weapon. Or both, they never were that picky with their morals. He hefted a weary sigh, giving a death glare to rival that of the Uchihas and Hyugas at the towering mound of paperwork at his desk. He looked away to sip his tea, before a knock at the door startled him. He sent another glare at the paperwork, swearing that it had multiplied when he looked away, and yelled out, "Come in." To say he was surprised and a little suspicious when a heavily cloaked figure walked into the room, with the only visible characteristics being the lower half of his face, would be a slight understatement. He had one of his hands below the desk, ready to push the "alert the Anbu" button if the person should prove hostile. His eyes roamed over the figure, which was moderately tall, with no immediately defining characteristics besides two silvery white strands of hair ending a little past the chin. His eyes seemed to be drawn to the hair, as if trying to remind him of something important, but he shoved that thought aside, pondering instead the figure's purpose. The voice coming from within the cloaked hood was soft, yet masculine. A stray draft of wind blew through the office, lifting the hood up and over the figure's head, which was odd, since the windows were closed, as was the door. The first thing Sarutobi noticed were the tattoos spread across the teen's face, followed closely by the piercing golden eyes, twinkling dimly in amusement. Excitement. He didn't know. Following that, he noticed the rather long hair, the same color as the locks on either side of his face, yet with a few metallic silver streaks sewn in. Finally his eyes rested on the dark blue lips, oddly wondering if that was natural, or if the boy had a thing for lipstick. "It's been a while, hasn't it, Sandaime-sama?" Now the Hokage was really confused. He couldn't seem to remember anyone with those rather unique characteristics, and yet the boy claimed to know him. He was about to ask who the teen was, before he was cut off, almost as if he knew what Sarutobi was thinking. "Ah, I'm crushed, Hokage-sama. You forgot that I was going to return today. For shame." Sandaime gave an imperceptible start, his mind screaming at him for not noticing it earlier. His eyes widened in astonishment, choking out a stuttered sentence while his mind worked furiously at how the boy changed so much. Naruto. The boy gave a half smirk, the tip of a pointed canine poking out over his dark blue lips, his eyes flashing in a mocking glint as he poked fun at the aged man. "Ah, have you gone senile already? If only I had known, I might have returned sooner to take care of you, O wise one. All that aside, though, it's good to see you again, Sarutobi-san." The Sandaime smiled slightly, feeling reassured that the cold boy that he remembered so long ago wasn't truly what Naruto had become. He still kept a bit of that deviant nature to him, regardless of his new appearance. He pulled out his pipe and lit it, settling back in his chair to relax and catch up with the teen. "So Naruto-kun, I hope your training trip proved fruitful." "Of course, Hokage-sama. I have also come to the conclusion that I should tell you about my abilities, so that you could perhaps assist me with avoiding the council's greedy clutches. Sarutobi smirked a little at the thought of getting back at Danzo and the rest of the council. They had been nagging at him over the years to mark Naruto a missing nin, regardless of the fact that he was a civilian when he left. This would show those old bats who's the Hokage. Oh, do tell, Naruto-kun. I'll keep this private for your sake. I do feel regretful about how I acted before you left, so I hope this can help make it up to you. Naruto's oddly colored lips curved upwards in a warm smile. He snapped his fingers within his sleeves, causing a purple glow to soak into the walls of the office. The Hokage looked at him curiously, wondering how he did that without hand seals and what he just did. Naruto saw the look, and promptly settled down in a chair opposite the Hokage and told him the same version of the story he told Zabuza and Haku, leaving out both his cousins. The Hokage was absolutely shocked at the news, and understood why he wanted to evade the council with this. If they got wind of it, he shuddered to think about it. Well, Naruto-kun, I do have to meet with the council, and I have to bring you with me. However, your idea seems to be the best, to play it off as a bloodline and that you're sterile. That way you won't be forced into a harem. I do have to ask, though, you said you found a potential sorceress knight on your trip, would you mind telling me who it is so that if they turn up at the gates that we don't attack them on sight? Naruto grinned mischievously at the Hokage, snickering almost evilly. Of course, Hokage-sama. The best candidate that I've found to be my knight is none other than Momochi Zabuza, the demon of the mist. If he were to become my knight, he'd also be bringing his apprentice Haku with him, and they'd both be under my protection so that the council couldn't use them against me in any way. We could say that my bloodline requires me to find a soulmate or something so that they don't ask about why a nuke nin would be living in my house, and why I'd need him to go on missions with me. Sarutobi nodded his head, thinking it over before standing up and walking over to Naruto. He held out his hand in a friendly gesture of peace, slightly surprised when an elegant, clawed hand grasped his gently and shook it. Now that that's out of the way, we need to meet with the council and get you your own apartment. The genin exams are tomorrow, so alright. You a pass to take them. I'm quite sure you'll pass most easily. With that said, Naruto laid his hand on the Hokage's shoulder, both of them vanishing through the floor in a ripple effect, to appear in the council room. Council room. The members of the council were fidgety today, as they received word that Uzumaki Naruto had returned. Danzo was having a hard time holding in his conspiratorial laughter when he heard. All he would have to do is approach the boy and offer him great power if he served nay. If he heard correctly, then the boy was an absolute idiot, so it wouldn't be that hard. Then he could have a new soldier for his army, one with the power of the nine-tailed fox. The rest of the council was murmuring in a mixture of fear, hatred, and anticipation of the demon brat returning. What if he had come back to kill them all? All speech was halted instantaneously as the floor near the door started to ripple, as if the hardwood floor had become liquid and someone dropped a rock into it. Quite a few people gasped as a rather attractive teen with white silver hair, golden eyes, tattooed features, and black clothing rose out of the liquid floor with the Hokage right beside him. Danzo was almost salivating with anticipation of all the uses he could find for a bloodline like that. The floor seemed to solidify under their feet, as Sarutobi coughed to regain attention. We're gathered here today to discuss one Uzumaki Naruto, as per request of both myself and the council. Naruto had to hold in a snort when he heard the word, Uzumaki. He hadn't gone by that name in ages, but it's not like they knew that. He glided forward on silent footsteps, approaching the pedestal in the middle of the semicircular room where speakers would stand. He cleared his throat a little to dismiss the new breakout of murmurs at his changed appearance, and shot a rather deadly glare at Danzo who was eyeing him like a piece of meat at the marketplace. Before I left to go on my training trip, I exhibited some abilities that were rather odd. Does the Honorable Council have any questions for me? His tone was light and mocking, astonishing the council members, for they had always been treated with the utmost respect. Danzo was the first to speak up, his eyes glinting in hunger as he asked his question. Naruto-san, are your abilities part of a newly evolved bloodline? The boy could barely hold in his killing intent, wanting nothing more than to obliterate the greedy fool addressing him. Nevertheless, he responded in a clipped, mock-polite tone, his face and eyes betraying no emotion. My abilities are a bloodline, yes, and before the council decides to either enact the Clan Restoration Act on me, or try to experiment on me, I have to say this. I am sterile, therefore, I cannot have children. My bloodline will die with me. Most of the council was astonished at the fact that the demon brat, of all people, had a bloodline. Bloodlines were held in high regard in the village, and to think that they had been neglecting one all along was almost a slap to the face, but that was quickly negated by their constant hatred returning at remembering that this was the demon brat they were talking about. Danzo's eyes lost a little of their hope of a new squad of bloodline soldiers created out of this new ability, but his resolve was hardened at getting the sole user of it. If he couldn't create test tube soldiers, then he'll use the original. Hiyashi had an appraising spark in his pupil-less lavender eyes as he inspected Naruto. The possibilities of that teleportation ability were endless. It was completely silent, didn't use any chakra, and didn't leave anything behind. He spoke up as Danzo sat down, brooding about how he would get the boy to work for him. Naruto-san, if I may ask, what else does your bloodline do? Naruto smiled, actually and truly smiled at the Hyuga clan head, shocking both the Hokage as well as much of the council. He knew the Hyuga had no hatred for him, he was just a calculating figure. He'd go with what logic showed, not allowing emotions rule him. I can do seal-less jutsu, my physical strength rivals that of Tsunade, and I can manipulate my cellular structure. However, my bloodline is both unrecorded and unnamed, so there would be no chance of you finding a record. A lot of the council sneered at such an unreasonable idea, thinking that he had lied to them about the capabilities of his bloodline. Hiyashi, however, was shocked, as he could see absolutely no lie, and he prided himself on knowing what each involuntary muscle twitch of the face would mean. The boy hadn't twitched even once. Danzo, however, well, he was in fantasy land about what he could do with such a power. Naruto merely smirked, looking out the window at a nearby training field. Getting a rather fun idea that would either A. scare the council into submission, B. gain their respect doubtful, or C. cause an absolute uproar. He was hoping it was all of the above. If it may please you, honored council, I could show you just what I mean at that training ground over there. The council hastily agreed, thinking that the demon brat would be caught in his own lie. Training ground 23, 5 minutes later. After everyone had arrived, Naruto nodded politely to Hiyashi, eyes flashing in anticipation of the council's faces. He even had a camera hidden up one of his sleeves to take the pictures. Hiyashi-sama, if I may. At the Hyuga clan head's curt nod, Naruto smiled and turned away from the council to hide the telltale glowing eyes. With a whispered incantation that nobody could hear, he raised one arm in front of him. A burst of bright green light exited his sleeve, expanding into a heavy green mist that exploded in a bright flash of white-green, releasing a keening roar and vaporizing nearly all of the training logs, and a few of the trees, in the training ground. The teen quickly whirled around, taking as many pictures as he could of the esteemed council, wetting their pants with their jaws hitting the ground. Even Hiyashi's perfect emotional control crumbled upon witnessing the feat of the boy, causing his jaw to drop, if only slightly. He quickly stashed the camera away, watching the council with a slight smirk. That was one of my more powerful jutsus, bloodline secret. Can't teach it to anyone else. Do you need a demonstration of my cellular manipulation? The council finally regained their composure, backing away in slight fear of the boy. Hiyashi was the one who replied with a slight nod of his head. Naruto simply slid the gi off slightly so that his shoulders were exposed. This elicited some questioning stares from the council members, to which he replied with his smirk still etched onto his face. I don't want to ruin my clothing while doing this, now do I. He could have sworn he heard the Hokage snicker at that. Naruto concentrated, not needing to close his eyes due to the lack of magic required for the feat. Two large, whip-like tentacles shot out of his shoulders, whirling around him in an intricate dance of death, causing utter destruction to the ground below. After about 15 seconds of the ground shaking and cracking underneath the onslaught, Naruto stopped and retracted the tentacles into his shoulders, slipping his top back over his shoulders with a shrug, not wanting the council to see his clawed fingertips and suspect something. Does that prove my abilities to you, now? Before I leave here to go find my new apartment that the Hokage so graciously gave me as a present on my return, I should notify you that my bloodline has one condition that I should warn you about. I have to find a soulmate soon, otherwise my abilities will rage out of control. I found a suitable one while traveling, but I won't bore you with the details. Suffice to say that if he accepts, you will grant him and his apprentice asylum, and allow them to live with me. If you don't, well, let's just say that my abilities are far more destructive when uncontrolled. The taunting smile, coupled with what the council had just witnessed, had them nodding at a pace rivaling a woodpecker. The boy smirked even wider, walking up to the Hokage and pocketing a jingling key ring. He waved his wide sleeve over his shoulder while walking away, not looking back once. The next day, Shinobi Academy. Iruka was absolutely giddy. Today was the day that the children were tested and released, never to bother him again. Oh, the joy! Even the note from the Hokage telling him he'd have a new student for the exams couldn't bring down his great mood. While Iruka was almost floating with joy, his assistant teacher, Mizuki, was having other thoughts. He had actually paid attention to the name on the sheet of paper, and recognized the demon's name on it. He was currently trying to think up a plan to torment him, following the teacher absent-mindedly. As they both walked into the classroom, Iruka utilized his Oni-Kyushi no Jutsu demon teacher technique to get the class attention. Just as he was about to start off the day, the wall near the door started rippling in a liquid fashion. A rather tall figure wearing a black hood, a loose-fitting black gi with wide sleeves, and black hakama stepped out of the ripple. The figure turned his head towards Iruka, walked up to the teacher at his desk, and a piece of paper slid out of one of the man's sleeves in front of him. Iruka looked over it for a moment before nodding, catching the class attention again. Naruto here will be taking the genin exam with the rest of you. This, of course, caused the room to break out into shrieks, screams, and yells of outrage at how some new kid got to come in and just take the test, while the rest of them had to go through all the academy classes. The figure loosed a rather small spike of his killing intent, freezing everyone where they stood, before cloaking it again. The room was awkwardly silent for a moment, before Iruka cleared his throat. Right, well, he's been on a training trip for the past 11 years, so he hasn't been able to attend the academy. Due to his lack of scholastic achievement, he'll be placed at the automatic bottom of the class, since we will have nothing but the test to determine his competence. Many of the male students snickered at that, leering at the figure with smug looks on their faces, as if they accomplished something great. The figure simply shrugged his shoulders, another mysterious blast of wind pushing the hood back from his face. It seemed to, once again, come out of nowhere, as the windows were closed, as was the door. The teen's striking looks astonished many of the class, and his soft voice carried over the silent masses as he spoke to the teacher. It doesn't matter to me, Iruka-san. Graduating at the bottom of the class has absolutely no say on my level of skill. It is just another meaningless label. I'm quite sure some of the less enthusiastic students, here he gave a pointed look at Nara Shikamaru, who blinked in surprise that the newcomer knew him somehow, or more than adequate, than say, some of the more enthusiastic students. He finished his statement with a look at Haruno Sakura, a pink-haired, flat-chested individual who was currently latched onto one Uchiha Sasuke's arm and squealing about. How awesome he was. Said Uchiha was trying hard to ignore the girl, turning his head away from her and glaring at a minute spot on the wall, angsting about how he would kill his brother. Naruto's statement was met with a few snickers as people realized what he was talking about. The boy walked up to the back row, away from all the students, and sat in one of the empty seats as the teachers started to pass out the written test. Naruto stared at the test for a moment, wondering how knowing exactly what shade of brown the Shadaime Hokage's hair had anything to with being a ninja. He looked over all the questions, wondering what had possessed these people to believe questions like, what was the name of the Shadaime's bloodline? And, if a kunai is flying at a rate of 30 feet per second in an easterly direction was being subjected to a 15 meters per hour northeastern wind, how far would you have to aim to the south to be sure the kunai flies true? Would help anyone with their ninja careers. He heaved a quiet sigh, grasping a pen and answering 6 of the 10 questions without showing his fingers once. After completing the minimal amount required, he sat back and let his eyes drift over his classmates, in an appraising stare. He immediately saw 8 other potential genin candidates, and quietly evaluated them. Uchiha Sasuke, heir to the Uchiha bloodline, the Sharingan mirror wheel eye, which is able to copy all forms of ninjutsu and taijutsu, and allows for effortless breaking of genjutsu. Judging by temperament, he was deeply traumatized by the Uchiha massacre when his brother, Uchiha Itachi, killed all the rest of his clan. Possibly an advanced jutsu library from his clan library. His Avenger persona is a liability, but if he can get over it, he may become a competent shinobi. Yamanaka Ino, heir to the Yamanaka clan, specializes in jutsus that affect the mind, branching off of the basic ability, the Shintenshin no Justu mind-body switch technique that possesses the target temporarily, but leaves the shinobi's body vulnerable while possession is occurring. Judging by the staring, if it can be called that, she is most likely a fangirl to the Uchiha. If she could drop the habit, she would make a talented genjutsu user. Nara Shikamaru, heir to the Nara clan, specializes in shadow jutsus, using the owner's shadow, branching off of the Kujimane no Jutsu shadow imitation technique that forces the opponent to imitate every move made by the user. Judging by his lazy demeanor, yet calculating gaze, he is also afflicted by the horrible sickness known as male Nara's syndrome, EMS for short. Symptoms include extreme lethargy, genius-level intellect, and a rather interesting attraction to women with prominent tempers that keep them in line. Akamichi Choji, heir to the Akamichi clan, specializes in body-altering jutsus, using caloric supply in fat to augment their different physical aspects. Uses the Baika no Jutsu multi-size technique as the base, enlarging their entire bodies. Can be channeled into specific parts of the body, such as arms or legs. The Akamichi clan almost always eats, to keep up their fat supply as fuel for their techniques. Never ever call an Akamichi fat, as it will bring about a fury that is usually only seen in women who have discovered a pervert. Jenova snickered in his mind at that last part, before sending a rather revealing image of what she imagined Zabuza would look like, sans clothing. This act caused Naruto to almost lose his cool, the only outward symptoms being a single drop of blood from his nose, and an almost unnoticeable blush across the bridge of his nose. Aburame Shino, heir to the Aburame clan. Their bodies are hosts to colonies of Kikai destruction bugs that feed off of chakra. As the Aburame clan only have a minute amount of chakra, they simply direct their Kikai to mimic other abilities, such as creating clones and walls out of their Kikai. They're quite useful as scouts, and I think I see one inspecting me. Using a minute amount of magic, Naruto blew the Kikai back in Shino's direction on a tendril of wind, watching as the teen twitched a little, realizing his bug had been found out. He seemed moderately surprised that the bug was still alive after being caught, seeing as how most would simply squish it. Naruto nodded a little in acknowledgement, noticing the Aburame staring at him in confusion, before going back to his observations. Hyuga Hinata, heir to the Hyuga clan and the Byakugan, all-seeing eyes that can be used to see the chakra network, internal organs, see through some objects, and even can be focused as a sort of telescope. Unlike other Hyugas, she seems to be timid and shy. Probably denoted as weak, regardless of her main branch status, if the lack of a curse seal on her forehead is an indicator. Hyugas use their excellent chakra control to inject their chakra into an opponent's tenketsu points, the areas where chakra is released from the body, to shut down the point temporarily. Can also be used to attack internal organs directly with close-range chakra blasts. Perhaps, if she is not suited for combat, she would be better suited to being a medic nin. The Byakugan would help in that field. Inazuka Kiba, heir to the Inazuka clan, tracking specialists that have a bond with their canine companions. Their senses are almost dog-like, with enhanced hearing, smell, and a little bit of sight. His arrogant nature will be his downfall, though, if he doesn't realize he's never the best. After searching around a bit, just to make sure his observations were completely correct, Naruto held in a groan of despair at the last likely candidate to be a genin. If the rest of the class wasn't absolutely hopeless, she would never make it, seeing as how she was only marginally better than a civilian in combat. Heaving a silent sigh, he completed his observations. Haruno Sakura, heir to the Haruno clan, though they aren't a shinobi clan. That means that she is a first-generation shinobi. This won't end well. Her blind devotion to her, Sasuke-kun, will definitely be a massive fault. At least her overly large forehead has a decently smart brain behind it. She also probably has good chakra control, though seeing as how her chakra levels are barely higher than a civilian, it's not saying much. Her devotion to the Uchiha seems to run fairly deep, so it'll take something absolutely horrendous to break. If she could get rid of it, and still be mentally stable to keep being a kunoichi, then her chakra control coupled with her intelligence would make her a good medic or genjutsu user. Content with his observations of his classmates, Naruto looked up just in time to see Iruka retrieving his test, and the rest of the class headed outside for their taijutsu and throwing weapon test. He followed them soon after, leaving no trace that he was ever in the room. Outside, as Iruka called out the different people to spar against Mizuki, said assistant was realizing that his could be his chance to injure, or possibly, accidentally, kill the demon once and for all. He could barely keep the malicious smirk off of his face as he waited for his chance. Most of the students fared well against the teacher, which surprised Naruto, considering his first evaluation on Sakura. After retrieving a crowbar to pry the pink leech off of Sasuke so that he could take his test, said Uchiha passed at the top of the class. His smug smirk was almost communicating to the entire world that, of course I passed. I'm an Uchiha. Uchihas are always the best. Finally it was Naruto's turn to spar against Mizuki. His golden eyes caught the mixture of loathing, anticipation, and excitement swimming through the silver-haired assistant's eyes, and he realized that the teacher would be actually trying to harm him. He heaved a soft sigh, looking completely bored out of his mind as he kept his stance, standing still with both feet together, and both arms in his sleeves, giving a good impression of a monk. This, of course, pissed off Mizuki to no end that the demon brat wasn't taking him seriously, so he charged at full speed towards the long-haired teen. Right before he was about to land a punch to Naruto's jaw, the boy lifted one hand, and quicker than the eye could see, flicked Mizuki right in the forehead, sending the poor man careening into a wall with a crack, returning to his stance before anyone realized what happened. Iruka was speechless at the power, precision, and control the boy showed in his single attack. He not only immobilized his attacker, but it was a non-lethal hit used to knock out his assistant. Granted, he'll probably have broken a few ribs from hitting the wall like that, but there would be no permanent damage. What Naruto said next shocked both him and the entire class. Damn, I was trying to hold back so I wouldn't break anything, but he still broke a few ribs, and I think dislocated his shoulder from that. How was I supposed to know he was so aerodynamic? Sasuke was furious, however, that the dobi of the class would have so much power. He needed that power, he was an Uchiha, dammit. He needed to kill his brother. After everyone had collected their jaws, and sent Mizuki to the hospital, it was time for the throwing weapon accuracy test. Fortunately, or unfortunately, Sakura's aim wasn't horrible, so that almost guaranteed her passing. She scored 70% on her accuracy test, which then prompted her to suction onto Sasuke's arm, screeching about how true love prevails. And how her, Sasuke-kun, was so awesome. After a medic was called to heal Iruka's eardrums from being caught point blank by her banshee scream of doom, Sasuke was up next, scoring 90% on the test, one of his shuriken barely missing the bullseye on the last target. As Iruka called Naruto forward, he realized the team didn't have a kunai or shuriken pouch, and brought this up with him. His question was met with howls of laughter from most of the class, thinking he forgot it at home or something. His answer, however, shut them up quickly. His soft voice was as cold and apathetic as ever, not lauding off his abilities, just stating facts. I do not require pouches to hold my weapons, for I simply create my own when I need them. With a swift flick of both arms, hundreds of frozen senbon shot from his sleeves and littered the targets, multiple needles clustering on the absolute center of each target. The tattooed young man turned towards the shell-shocked teacher and raised an elegant eyebrow in question, voicing his thoughts. Will this do, or am I required to use shuriken and kunai? The teacher shook his head in a silent no, before clapping his hands over his ears as he saw Sakura striding over to him, flames of feminine fury glowing in her green eyes. She opened her mouth to shriek and scream about how there was no way the stupid dobi could have beaten my Sasuke-kun, but as soon as her lips parted, Naruto struck out in self-preservation of his hearing. Uttering a soft, seal evil, the girl's whole body was placed into stasis, hand raised as if to hit Naruto over the head for daring to try to be cooler than Sasuke-kun. The rest of the class stared openly at the sight, as Naruto took 2 steps backwards out of hitting range, waiting for the stasis to wear off. He tilted his head politely towards Iruka, who had tears of joy springing from his eyes that would make Maeda Guy and Rock Lee envious of his youthfulness. From avoiding certain deafness, the boy's dark blue lips twitched, as if wanting to smirk, before settling back into his normal apathy. He voiced his concerns to the teacher, slowly backing away from Sakura, who was sure to regain control of her body soon. Iruka-san, she will only hold that way for another 15 seconds or so, although she will not be able to use her voice for about 5 to 10 minutes afterwards. I believe by the time we reach the classroom she will be able to speak again, so shall we head back, or is there another test to be taken out here? Iruka simply shook his head, waiting for the Sakura statue to regain movement before calling the class to go back inside. Many of the students were staring at Naruto in starry-eyed wonder at how he was able to silence Sakura, if only temporarily. Even Sasuke was mildly thankful at the newcomer for the silence. However, his slightly better than usual mood quickly sank into brooding angst territory when he realized that Dobi had done a technique that he, and Uchiha, didn't know of. To top it off, he didn't even use hand seals. Or maybe, his mind supplied, he did the hand seals in his sleeves. He would have to try to copy the technique with his Sharingan once he unlocked it. Back in the classroom, after holding a raging Sakura out of fist range of Naruto, who had dared to do something to her when she was simply going to protect Sasuke-kun's awesome reputation, the class filed back into the room. After a short lecture on which ninjutsu they'd need to show to pass the final part of the exam and receive their Hitai 8 forehead protector, the class was called out alphabetically to come to the front, demonstrate the Bunshin no Jutsu clone technique, Kawarimi substitution, and Henge transformation, as well as one technique of their choosing, optional, for extra credit. The clan heirs showed off their techniques, Choji using a Baika no Jutsu to swell into a passable imitation of a giant volleyball, Ino using Shintenshin no Jutsu to possess Iruka to hand her the Hitai 8, Shikamaru using Kajimane no Jutsu to achieve the same effect. Shino used his Kikai to do the test by doing a Mushi Bunshin bug clone. He was able to use his minuscule chakra supply that the Kikai left him to accomplish a passable Henge and Kawarimi. Kiba showed off his Jujin Bunshin man-beast clone that turned his wolf-sized dog, Akamaru, into a clone of him. Hinata used the Shugohawk Rokujuyansho protection of the 8 trigrams, 64 palms to create a barrier that could be used offensively. Sasuke opened a window and used Kaden, Gukakyu no Jutsu fire element, grand fireball technique to shoot a large fireball out the window, which gained him a squeal from many of the girls in the class, Hinata a noted exception. Sakura was the only one who didn't have a special skill, due to being a first-generation shinobi. Finally it was Naruto's turn. He was debating on what he should do, when his cousin spoke up, giving him the perfect idea for a technique. He would have to fake a name for it, though, so while he walked up, he was debating what to call it. Finally he performed the technique specified, using his magic to mimic the effects, though he swore he'd never need any of the abilities. Finally it was time for his special technique. He was unable to hold back the devious smirk as he let his GI slip off of his right shoulder, exposing a little bit of his upper right back and torso. At the class, questioning of his action, he replied with I don't want to ruin my clothing when there's no dire need to. He concentrated on what he was trying to do, and 2 tentacles shot out of his back, bulging at the tips as they hovered next to him. The cells replicated as fast as absolutely possible, quickly forming a perfect representation of both Jenova and Ultimecia, after which the tentacles retreated to his back. He even got Ultimecia's rather skanky dress created with the correct details. She was clothed the way she was when she cast time compression, with a large feathery black collar spread wide open. Her dress was open in the front, the edges barely covering her modesty and showing off the tribal tattoos along her stomach. The cloth came together at the front of her hips, before separating at mid-thigh, flowing outwards in a train and showing the rest of the tattoos along her legs. The dress had long, red sleeves that melted into a light purple near the mid-forearm, ending in clawed gloves, perfect for her fingers. She even had her hair horn ornament thing, with the tips also a light purple. Her black, feathery wings spread wide before folding back into themselves to conserve space. Jenova was simply clothed in black shinobi pants and a vest over an Anbu armor-style breastplate, her ethereal hair pulled into a high ponytail with strands falling on either side of her face, like Naruto. Naruto gave a smug smirk as both the women turned to face the class, eliciting gasps of surprise and awe at the odd features of both women. Jenova's glowing red eye, especially, scared the students and even the teacher a little. It was a little too close to the shade of red that was seen in the Kyuubi's eyes over 14 years ago, not to mention it was glowing, and tales of Kyuubi's blood red eye color were often used to describe the fox to little ninja children. Naruto's voice echoed a little in the completely silent class, naming off the jutsu he created, as he pushed the consciousnesses of both his Kasens into their respective clones. Saibo Seigyo Bunshin, self-control clone. The teacher was staring in awe of the lifelike clones, until Ultimecia glared at him. She looked over to both Jenova and Naruto, and feeling them both mentally nod at her, prepared to introduce herself, making sure it looked like Naruto was controlling clones. She stepped forward, grinning evilly and tapping the teacher's desk, causing it to explode into a shower of sawdust. The entire class stared in open awe at the sight, realizing that the clones were actually real, not the illusions created by the Bunshin no Jutsu. Ultimecia gave a soft laugh and introduced herself in an odd manner, making sure to not draw any suspicion from the class as to the real nature of the clones. This is a replica of Ultimecia, the grand sorceress who cast time compression. She disappeared after casting the spell, which caused widespread destruction, and modified the continents into the one large mass that they are today. A few people backpedaled away from her, as if afraid the clone had the power of the real Ultimecia, which she did, but they didn't know that. Jenova walked forward next, her sibilant voice echoing in the quiet classroom as she introduced herself in the same way, destroying the chalkboard in a shower of green dust. This is a replica of Jenova, the so-called calamity of the heavens who crashed into the planet thousands of years ago. Her body was later experimented on to create Sephiroth, who was able to summon a large meteor that almost destroyed the planet. She lived thousands of years before Ultimecia. With their introductions completed, Jenova rested an arm around Ultimecia's neck, and they both melted into the wall, teleporting to Naruto's new house to help fix it up while he was finishing up with class. Said teen walked up to the front of the class, and grabbed a Hittite set against black cloth, tying it around his upper left arm. He then walked all the way back to his seat, waiting for people to break out of the shock. Sasuke was the first, who glared at him, pissed beyond reason that he had shown a cooler jutsu than him. He was followed closely by Sakura, who was strangely silent. After telling the class to come back the next day at 8 in the morning to meet their Junin senseis, the class left in an orderly manner. Iruka was left in the classroom, staring at the small powder that used to be his desk. His mind wandered to the possibilities of using that same amount of power to demolish the tests that were piled up in an excellent portrayal of Hokage paperwork, but dismissed the thought, too giddy at the thought that he was free. After returning home for the day, Naruto inspected his new apartment. It was a single story, and had 3 bedrooms, 2 full bathrooms, a kitchen, and a living room. To him, it was perfect. The fridge was stocked with new food, courtesy of the Hokage, and the place was quite clean, thanks to the combined power of a grand sorceress and a powerful alien. As he turned in for the night, he placed powerful magical wards around his house, and fell into a deep slumber. Later that night, Mizuki was caught trying to steal the Forbidden Scroll due to his debilitating wounds. He was executed after interrogation, finding that he was nothing but a lackey to Orochimaru, who had no useful information. The next day, Naruto woke up at 5 in the morning, feeling intrigued at who his new teacher would be. Unwilling to sit and wait, he got up, went through his morning routine to get cleaned up, and teleported into the Hokage's office. After greeting the aged man and giving him a tip on how to do his paperwork, don't cage Bunshin's shadow clone, relay all their information to the caster after they're dispelled. Then you could have clones do the work. Naruto asked him for the files on different Junin that were being assigned teams. The Hokage, still giddy and trying to hug Naruto for defeating the evil known to all cages, gave him copies of the files without a second thought. He teleported back to his apartment, thumbing through them and picking out the ones he was most likely to be paired with. He woke up his Kasens to ask them their opinions on the different teachers. They both agreed on a few key points to each instructor, and after learning how the teams were paired up, they found the teacher he was most likely going to be stuck with. Yuahi Kurenai, Genjutsu Mistress, New Junin. Both Jenova and Ultimecia figured she'd get a low-hassle team that could learn from their families in case her teaching wasn't good enough, or didn't have the skills to teach them the ninjutsu, taijutsu they would need past the basics. Sarutobi Asuma, Wind Affinity and Hand-to-Hand Weapon Tactics Specialist. He was most likely to get the next generation of the Inoshika Cho trio, seeing as how he was quite proficient in team tactics. Hitaki Kakashi, also known as Sharingan no Kakashi, or Kakashi of the Sharingan-ai. He has an implanted Sharingan-ai, and is a ninjutsu specialist. Naruto was most likely going to be stuck with this teacher, since he was sure the council forced Hitaki to take on the Uchiha's team to teach him how to use his Sharingan. Due to the fact that Naruto graduated as the Dobi, though all his practical exams surpassed most Junin, he was most likely going to be paired with Sasuke, the Rookie of the Year, and Sakura, the Kunoichi of the Year. Known to be exactly 3 hours late to everything not life-threatening, he is also incredibly lazy and lax in nature. He had to refrain from pounding his head against a wall, envisioning at least 6 months with them. Seeing as how the Chunin exams were held exactly 6 months after the Genin exams, and were hosted biannually. After clearing his mind of suicidal thoughts, and desperate plans to permanently silence the pink-haired leech, he teleported back to the Hokage's office. He caught the aged man reading a rather adult, orange book named Ika Ika Paradise. After assuaging the Hokage's fears of being found out and refusing to buy the book, as Jenova had suggested, he returned the files and left, preferring to wander the different training grounds around the village while he waited for the morning to wane. Training Ground 7, 7:59 a.m. Naruto had finished inspecting each of the training grounds, finding each one to be rather bland. He almost laughed when he saw how his absolute destruction of Training Ground 23 was still waiting for repair. Upon arriving at Training Ground 7, he realized that someone was nearby. He followed his feeling to a large stone monument, dedicated to the shinobi who had fallen in battle. He noticed that there was a Junin with naturally gray, gravity-defying hair, a face mask, and his hidai-8 tilted to cover his left eye already there staring at the stone. More specifically, he was staring at 3 names on the stone. Keeping his presence hidden, Naruto focused his eyes, trying to see if he could find which 3 names out of the hundreds the man was staring at. After about 2 minutes, he was able to make out the names of Namikaze Minato, Inuzuka Rin, and Uchiha Obito. His curiosity sated, Naruto walked out into the clearing, and knelt next to the crouching man. His long hair was blowing softly in a stray breeze as he prayed in silence next to the man, paying his own respects for the dead. While he may not exactly like the village too much due to their treatment of him, he respected the shinobi who had devoted their life to the end to protect their home. As he focused a bit more, he made contact with the livestream, hearing the familiar hum and pulse of the souls. He sent a mental feeling to those who had died for Konoha that he respected their decisions to die for their home, and that he wouldn't let their deaths be in vain. The shinobi still flowing through the planet were a little shocked that someone was actually able to communicate with them. Naruto singled out a select 3, telling them that, what he assumed a dear friend of theirs was also paying his respects for them. At his description of the shinobi next to him, they told him who it was. Naruto's blue lips curved into a sad smile as he realized that Kakashi must come here every day to pay his respects, feeling guilty for whatever reason that they were dead. He didn't reveal that he was Minato's son, even to the souls of the dead, as he felt it would be more trouble than it was worth. He pushed the connection to the planet to the back of his mind, telling the 3 that he would relay their message to the grief-stricken man beside him. Standing up slowly, he realized that a small field of flowers had bloomed around the monument, an aftereffect of communicating with the livestream. Kakashi was currently staring at him with his one revealed eye wide in shock. Naruto gave another sad smile as he stood to his full height, turning to head to the academy where he was already 2 hours late. Before he left, though, he called over his shoulder to the man, shocking him to the core. Rin wants to let you know that it wasn't your fault she died. She knew exactly what she was doing, and what would happen, when she ran to one of the makeshift medical tents in the direct path of the Kyuubi. She was able to evacuate 80 people before the tent was crushed beneath the fox, and she was glad to be able to give her life for many others. Obito wants to let You know that he's proud to call you his best friend, and that he's glad you used his eye to protect others. He also wants to let you know that you shouldn't rely on it too much, as much of the Uchiha clan used to do. And finally, Minato wanted to tell you that he's proud to have been your sensei, and wishes you would stop spending so much time here. While it is good to acknowledge the deaths of comrades, you shouldn't dwell on it too much and let it consume you. Never let their deaths be in vain, but don't obsess about what you could have done to prevent it. With the soul's messages relayed, he disappeared into the forest, walking at a slow pace towards the academy, leaving the Junin to stew on what he had said. Half an hour later, just as he was about to open the door to his class, a poof of smoke appeared next to him, revealing the same man he had left at the memorial. Naruto opened the door and peered inside, seeing that only Sakura and Sasuke were left, and were absolutely livid at having to wait 3 hours for both their teammate and sensei. Naruto quickly ducked back out before they could notice him, nodding to the cycloptic Junin beside him. "Hitaki Kakashi, I presume. I'm Naruto, one of your students. Your other two are in there." After notifying his students to meet on the roof, the gray-haired man poofed up to the meeting place, seeing his third student already waiting for him. He decided to ask the question that had been burning in his mind for the past half an hour, since the other two wouldn't be up to the roof quite yet. "How were you able to know what the dead were saying? Normally, I'd be suspicious that you were faking it, but with all the information you gained from just praying there, as well as the mysterious flowers blooming spontaneously while you were paying your respects, I believe you actually did talk to the dead." Naruto flicked his golden eyes to rest on his teacher's one eye as he gave a wan smile. He figured he could let his teacher in on at least one secret, as all records of the ancients had been destroyed ages ago from the time compression. "I am deeply connected to the planet, so I am able to converse with the lifestream, the blood of the planet, which is simply all the souls of the dead as well as their energy. I noticed you were staring hard at 3 specific names, so when I was giving my respects for the Konoha souls that gave their lives for their home, I singled those 3 out and told them that you seemed to be grieving heavily over their deaths. They wanted me to pass on the message to you so that you wouldn't get stuck in the past, forever obsessing over some decision that took too long, some option overlooked." The teacher was stunned at his student, his eye crinkling up into an upside-down U, showing that he was smiling behind the mask. "Well, I suppose that answers that question. I'd like to talk with you a bit later, though. Here come your teammates." Sasuke opened the door to the roof, his clothes and hair looking rumpled, and the glint in his eyes absolutely murderous. Sakura followed at a comfortable distance, parasitically attached to his arm, and was giggling in a way that she must have deemed seductive. Kakashi chose to further infuriate them with his patented eye smile, acting as if nothing was wrong. Naruto was hard-pressed to not let out a snort of laughter when he realized what the teacher was playing at. Jenova and Ultimecia, having no such restrictions on their behavior, were placing bets on which of his 2 teammates would be the first to snap, and when. "Now that we're all here, how about we do introductions? Name, likes, dislikes, hobbies, dreams. Pinky, you first." Sakura twitched at the nickname, a vein standing out in stark relief against her temple as she fought to control her anger. Her split personality was having a field day in her head, yelling out curses and punching the air. She chose to smile sweetly and put a finger to her lip, curling closer to Sasuke and quite possibly cutting off circulation through his arm. "Kakashi-sensei, can you go first?" Finding a new opportunity to infuriate his charges, Kakashi started it off with another eye smile. "My name is Hitaki Kakashi, Kakashi-sensei to you 3. I have some likes. My dislikes, dreams. I have some hobbies." Jenova and Ultimecia were watching through the monitor, popcorn in hand while counting out how many ticks until Sakura gets an aneurysm. The score so far was 8, and still no brain bleeding. They were sure she would crack soon, though. "Pinky, you go next." 9. My name is Haruno Sakura. Here she smiled like a shy girl, acting as if she wasn't trying to somehow meld her body into Sasuke's. If her death grip on his arm was any indication, my likes are, well, the person I like is, here she giggled and snuck a not-so-secret look at Sasuke, getting a light blush on her cheeks. My dislikes are, Ino Buddha pig. At this point her alternate personality came into play, killing intent flaring from her as flames not unlike the flames of youth, burning in her eyes. After calming down, she continued with her introduction. My hobbies are, she sent another not-so-secret glance at Sasuke and blushed, again, in my dreams. At this point Naruto whipped out 2 sets of ear muffs, placing one set on his head, and one on Kakashi's head. Just in time, too, because her squeal was loud enough that it shook the foundations of the building, the sound even going through the ear protection to cause a slight headache. Several dogs all across Konoha, as well as the entirety of the Inuzuka kennel all howled in agony at the pitch. After removing the ear protection, Kakashi sent a thankful glance to Naruto, who was currently staring in awe at how powerful that girl's lungs must be. Jenova and Ultimecia both swore that the Banshee's voice could be used as a lethal weapon, and if she augmented it with chakra it might cause more devastation than some of the forbidden magic. Kakashi sent a glance at Sasuke, who seemed absolutely fine regardless of the fact that a fangirl had squealed loud enough to be rated on the Richter scale. Both Naruto and Kakashi pitied the poor lad, for this must have been an everyday occurrence. Hoping to end the introduction soon so that he might escape the blast radius of another squeal, Kakashi pointed towards Sasuke, silently hoping that the boy wasn't a talker. My name is Uchiha Sasuke. At this point, the earmuffs were back out as another squeal escaped the girl's throat. I have no likes, I dislike many things, but mostly my fangirls, and my dream. My dream is more of an ambition. To kill a certain man, and to revive my clan. The sheer waves of angst radiating off of the Uchiha could have made flowers wilt. Thankfully, he wasn't near the Yamanaka flower shop. Kakashi pointed to Naruto next, who shrugged his shoulders in an uncaring gesture, opting to make his introduction as short as possible. My name is Naruto. No surname. My likes. Here he shrugs, his cousins giggling hysterically as the tick count on Sakura reached 14, dislikes. I guess labels, being known for something that doesn't reflect on you as a person. This confused his 2 teammates, and gave Kakashi a much-needed hint of his interesting student's identity. Hobbies. He shrugs again, trying hard to keep a straight face as Jenova and Ultimecia started to chant, pop, 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 while staring at the tick mark on Sakura's temple. My dreams. He actually had to think about this one, as he never really thought about it. I suppose, my dream is to find my knight. His 2 teammates were slightly confused at this, thinking that the boy was talking about a symbolic knight in shining armor. Kakashi, however, was sure the boy was dropping hints at him, especially since he caught the discreet wink that Naruto gave him. He further resolved to learn more about this student, especially if he passed the bell test. The council only wanted him to teach Sasuke how to use his Sharingan anyway. It's not like he had to teach him jutsu. He might think about teaching his other 2 students, except Sakura doesn't even seem to want to be a ninja, and his other student, after he heard of the stunt he pulled during his exams, he probably didn't need teaching. Well, now that we're all acquainted, Sakura gave an unladylike snort, as her weird teammate and teacher didn't say much at all. Meet at Training Ground 7 at 7 a.m. tomorrow for your real test. It has a 66% failure rate. Don't eat, or else you'll throw up. Without waiting for a response, he poofed away in another shunshin, narrowly escaping the enraged yell that split the skies after he left, a resounding, what? Echoing off the buildings. Naruto, thankfully, had also teleported almost as soon as the teacher did. He smiled to himself as he meditated in his house, working on a theory of how to possibly mix 2 different elements together with Ultimecia and Jenova. His teacher was quite interesting, and seemed the type that Naruto might open up to, in time. Both his cousins were depressed, though, in the middle of his introduction, Naruto had also placed a bet, saying that the teacher would do something incredibly frustrating at the end of the session, and then Sakura would snap. He, of course, won the bet. Next morning, 10 a.m. Naruto had paid his respects to the dead again at the memorial stone, noticing that Kakashi seemed a bit happier than the day before. The flowers around the stone were flourishing, and Naruto made a note to come there whenever he wanted to communicate with the planet. After waiting the customary 3 hours, he appeared in a slight ripple from a tree, out of sight of his 2 teammates. He counted down in his mind, slipping 2 pairs of earmuffs into his hands as he prepared to ambush his team with his teacher. 3, 2, 1, as if on cue, both appeared at the same time, Kakashi's shunshin smoke covering the ripple from Naruto's teleport. The silver white-haired teen quickly slipped the ear protection, extra strength with duct tape, over both their heads, heaving a relieved sigh when the banshee's screech of, "You're late," was blissfully silent. Kakashi gave his patented, "I smile," pulling 2 bells out of his kunai pouch. After he explained his bell test, Sakura and Sasuke took to the trees, while Naruto simply walked over to the 3 training logs and sat down, leaning his back against the middle one. This perplexed his sensei, who was looking forward to learning a bit more about the boy. If he didn't participate in the test, how was he supposed to pass? 2 hours later, 12 p.m. noon. The bell rang, and despite the Uchiha's ingenuity with his Kaiden Jutsu, hiding shuriken within the fireballs of the Kaiden, Hausenka no Jutsu fire element, Phoenix fire flower, he still didn't get a bell. Sakura was knocked unconscious by a D-ranked genjutsu called Megan, Narukumi demonic illusion, nightmare viewing, causing the teacher to sweat drop. According to the Academy's evaluation, the girl was a natural for genjutsu and medic jutsu. As he sighed and prepared to fail his students, he heard a slight tinkling coming from the middle log. The tinkling was coming from one of Naruto's sleeves. The teen opened his eyes and pitched both bells to his teammates, revealing the true nature of Kakashi's test. It was all about teamwork. You were supposed to put aside your differences, and work together to get a bell. Kakashi nodded a little, telling them to meet the next day at the same time to start their missions, congratulating them on being his first team he passed, but held Naruto back to talk with him. After his teammates were out of sight, Kakashi asked the question. "How did you get the bells? When did you get them?" Naruto gave a mischievous smirk, looking pointedly at the bells that he had supposedly recovered, that Kakashi was holding. They both melted into tiny puddles, showing that they were just ice replicas. Kakashi was astonished at the simplicity of it, and reached down to his waist, and there they were. Both bells were still tied to his waist. Naruto stood to go, calling over his shoulder to his enigmatic sensei. "Perhaps someday I will open up to you, Hitaki Kakashi. You are a very interesting individual, who knows? You may help me restore my faith in humanity." With his parting shot, Naruto phased into the ground, teleporting back to his apartment to meditate some more on his theory. 5 months later, in the middle of Konoha Forest. Frost, in position, over. A soft murmur was heard through radio headsets. Cyclops, in position, over. A lazy drawl seconded, with an accompanying sound that was suspiciously like the turnings of a page, in a perverted novel. Obsessive angst in position. "Never letting you choose the names again, Naruto. Over," was the response coming from a thoroughly pissed Uchiha. Pink Banshee in position. "I agree with Sasuke-kun on that. Over." Frost closing in on the target. 5 meters, 3 meters, 1 meter. A soft mumble was heard through the link, but nobody could discern what it was. Target acquired. "If I have to catch this cat again, I'm upgrading it to assassination. Report to Hokage Tower, over." In the Hokage Tower, a pissed-off Uchiha, followed by an equally pissed-off Haruno, entered the room to find the fire daimyo's wife squeezing the life out of the poor cat, Tora. Inner Sakura was cheering, plotting her revenge if the cat ever escaped again. Sasuke smirked at the cat's position, satisfied that it was suffering for making him go through the forest for it. Naruto was still emotionless, yet you could tell he was getting pissed at the cat retrieval missions. Inside his head, Ultimecia was sharpening a butcher's cleaver, and Jenova was preparing a barbecue. "For the next time the cat escapes," they said. The Hokage smiled kindly, shooting a glare out the side of his vision towards the stack of paperwork growing from the floor. He swore it was growing like fungus. The fire daimyo's wife thanked them profusely and left, squeezing the cat so hard it was a wonder its back didn't snap. "Good job, Team 7. Now for your next mission you can choose: weeding the gardens, carrying dog food to the Inuzuka kennel, helping Councilman Mitokado Homura with his grocery shopping." A loud hissing snarl was heard from outside the tower, followed by a, "No. Tora, come back, or capturing the fire daimyo's wife's cat again." At this, Naruto's temper finally flared, his eyes flashing a bright golden, a detail only caught by Kakashi and the Sandaime, before a loud explosion rocked the tower, followed by wounded Muling and the fire daimyo's wife yelling out, "Oh Tora! Are you alright? Come to Kasen so I can hug it better." Reining his anger back in, Naruto gritted his teeth and ground out a sentence in a monotone, as both his cousins raged inside his mind how he should have used forbidden magic to put the cat out of its misery once and for all. Hokage-sama, I believe we have completed the prerequisites for AC ranked mission. If you do not cooperate with this demand, then I'm afraid I'll hire myself for a solo assassination mission on that cat, and I promise Genins will never have to chase it again. The Sandaime and Kakashi both stared at Naruto, Sarutobi in amusement and slight fear, and Kakashi in wonder, as well as slight suspicion. He was getting closer to his pragmatic student, but he had yet to open up to him more than their first meeting. Alright, I'll give Team 7 AC ranked escort mission. He pushed his secretary button and asked her to send in Tazuna. The door opened and an inebriated middle-aged man stepped in, clothed in slightly worn worker's clothing. He was holding a sake bottle, his cheeks were flushed a light red, and everything about him smelled like alcohol. He looked over at Team 7, and quirked an eyebrow, asking loudly if those brats were going to protect a super bridge builder like me. His answer took the form of his sake bottle exploding into a shower of alcohol, the shards of the glass turned to powder from the force. Both the Sandaime and Kakashi stared at Naruto, whose eyes had once again brightened before fading back to normal. The bridge builder was thoroughly convinced that they would be just fine, told them to pack for about a month, and to meet him at the West Gate at 8 a.m. the next day. Thank for listening. Do hope you enjoy. If you guys enjoyed, if you want a next part of this video, like, subscribe and comment down below and turn on the bell notifications, and also check out the other videos that have created and enjoy. See you in the next video. Peace.